IB Nation, welcome back to another edition of the Irish Breakdown Podcast. It's Wednesday, it's hump day, it's the middle of the week, it's the last full practice of the week, it's all these great things, but it also means Trevor, and that's Trevor Trowbridge. We are 3 days away from watching Notre Dame again, watching the Irish get back at it here on Saturday against the Stanford Cardinal. A lot at stake, as we talked about yesterday, Trevor, and today we're going to dive a little bit deeper into the Notre Dame versus Stanford matchup from a defensive Notre Dame offense, Stanford defense standpoint. Then we're going to talk game records a little bit, and then we're going to dive into our buy so hold. So going to have a lot to discuss today. Tomorrow, me, you, and Ryan are going to give our keys to victory, and we're going to make our predictions. And then Bill Bender and I are going to have a lot to talk about with the big, huge weekend of college football. This is going to be, in my opinion, one of the best weekends of the season for college football, in my opinion, just from a marquee matchups. Now, what tends to happen sometimes, Trevor, when we get these great weekends is the games are a bunch of duds. Mm-hmm. It's either like a sloppy game or somebody just gets annihilated and they're not great games. But I just have a feeling, kind of ties into what my prediction was coming into the season. The one prediction I felt most confident about is there are going to be no undefeated teams in Power 4 this year. Just because I don't see anybody that's great, and I don't see anybody that's there's a lot of teams ascending, and outside of a couple teams, there aren't really a lot of just elite teams, and so that's kind of where it's at. So we're gonna dive into that tomorrow. Friday, you and I'll be back for the mailbag, and a lot to lock in on. I just want to issue an apology to everybody for us going at 2 again today. We are having some. We had a flood in our house this weekend, and we're having a lot of work done, demolition work on that. We're going to have to go through this process again. I am not saying this to complain. There are a lot of people in North Carolina and Tennessee that would love to trade places with me right now, and I'm very thankful and grateful that we are where we are, but it has just created a lot of havoc at my house, and they were supposed to be done with the work before 1 o'clock. They were not able to do that, and so that's why we're getting started late today. I just want to let you apologize for that. We do plan on we will definitely have to start at 1 tomorrow. Like, we can't, and I let them know that, like, hey, I got to start at 1 tomorrow. So we'll go through that, and that's just kind of what I've been dealing with the last few days. But again, my wife and I have had to sit down for a second and remember how blessed we are, because there are people that, our fellow citizens in different parts of this country that no longer have homes because of the storms. And some people are probably going to lose some homes again this weekend. So we will continue to pray for them and pray for the best. So I just letting you guys know so you understand why we went late again today and why we were late yesterday, but we're going to get back on track here very soon. They're doing a great job with the demo. We were very fortunate that it worked out, because there was another issue that we didn't know about that we now have found out. So anyway, that's kind of where we're at with everything, Trevor. So I just wanted to let everybody know that so we can get that out of the way. Now let's get down to Notre Dame football, Trev, because we talked about it yesterday, and we'll dive into it again today. This is a big game for Notre Dame, and sometimes big games aren't necessarily big because you're playing a great opponent, but it's big because this is an opportunity for you to make a statement, and statements aren't always good. Notre Dame's going to make a statement on Saturday. We just don't know what that statement's going to be. This is a big opportunity for them to make a statement, especially with, and I don't know if I mentioned yesterday, Notre Dame gets 3 games before the College Football Playoff Committee releases their first rankings, because Notre Dame has a bye the Saturday before those first rankings come out. So you get 3 cracks at this to really make a strong impression. And, this is going to be a big one against another ACC opponent, which still feels weird, but a rival, and a rival that beat you the last time on this field. So I'm excited about this game, but this is a big, big opportunity for Notre Dame, Trevor.
I'm excited for the game, Brian. I'm ready for an awesome weekend of football. Glad to hear everything with your house is going on time and on schedule, so for the most part. But I'm ready to get after it. It's a big game for Notre Dame. To your point, it's going to be a big evaluation tool for a lot of us to see. We've heard a lot of things about the team's getting better. They made some adjustments in the bye week, so excited to just see it out on the field, man, and see what the final product is going to start looking like for this team as we're coming into the home stretch. So really excited to get after it with you today, Brian.
So, Trevor, today's show is going to focus initially a lot on the offense, and we'll do some game records talk about the defense at the end, but we're going to talk a lot about the offense. And we had a plan for today's show where we're going to talk about offense and defense and all this, but honestly, outside of what we discussed yesterday, there's not a whole lot else to talk about. with the matchup of the defense against this really struggling Stanford offense. We'll get into some game records talk that's more Notre Dame centric about the defense, but we really wanted to focus on the matchup between the Notre Dame offense and Stanford defense, as we talked about yesterday, Trevor. And you and I have continued to dive even more into the film and really check out this Stanford team. And the first thing that you look at is just in general, as we mentioned yesterday, this is a big moment for the Notre Dame offense, Trevor. We talked about how this is a big moment for the team, but as we said in yesterday's show, for the defense, just keep doing what you're doing, right? Like, just repeat what you've done the last. I mean, even if you repeat the performance chat against Northern Illinois, which is very disappointing and substandard per their standard, it's still a game you gave up 16 points, right? Like, so you look at it and say, just kind of keep doing what you're doing. If you can get better, find some areas to improve upon, all that good stuff. But this game is really the opportunity for the team, but then more specifically, this is an opportunity for the Notre Dame offense to have sort of okay, it's time to step up moment, right? As we said yesterday, if you don't do it now, when's that going to happen? And there's two very different aspects to this matchup, Trevor. One is for the Notre Dame run game. This is actually, in my opinion, after studying the film, a very tough test for Notre Dame. I don't think that Stanford has the talent up in the front seven that Louisville had, but they're a pretty good run defense, and we'll get into that in a second. But then the other part of it is, okay, but they're not good in the pass defense for a lot of reasons, which Trevor and I are going to break down. And so now's the time to get rolling, or it's just, like you said, you were just going to have to accept the fact that what we've seen is just what they are, and they're just not going to get any better. So really, it's going to be a find out moment in both areas. And so let's start with the run game, and we'll just kind of cover this briefly, Trevor, as we look at this matchup. For the Notre Dame run game, it's kind of been, I mean, I feel like, I don't know if you agree with this, Trevor. I feel like with the run game, it's either really good or not. I mean, you look at the numbers, it's like 198 against A&M, 362 against Purdue, 270 against Miami, Ohio, but then only 123 against Northern Illinois and only 117 against Louisville. Now, they have scored at least 2 rushing touchdowns in every game, but the yards are not great. And this is a defense that is a lot more in line with what Northern Illinois and Louisville bring to the table than it is with what Miami of Ohio and Purdue bring to the table. Now, the anomaly is the Texas A&M game, because they actually are a pretty good run defense, and Notre Dame did some really good things in that game. But since then, they've had 2 games where they just absolutely obliterated their opponent, and then 2 games where they really honestly were substandard in the run game. And so we're going to have to find out, is this team just one that out-talents people and, can rip off some big plays, or can they figure out some stuff schematically and from an execution standpoint with the offensive line to go out there and thrive against the Stanford defense, which, much like Purdue, is very much geared towards at the very foundation of who they are to stop the run. Now, I think they're more sound than what Purdue is defensively, and I think they're more athletic than what Purdue is defensively. But this is a team that, from a front seven standpoint, Trevor, does present some unique challenges from a size and physicality standpoint, very experienced at the linebacker level, and pretty good scheme. So this is going to be a good test for the Notre Dame ground game, both from a personnel standpoint and from a coaching standpoint.
Yeah, I agree. Notre Dame's going to have to find different ways to make explosive plays in the run game, because that's where their rushing offense is stalled in those games that you had mentioned before. We had talked about it in previous shows, especially after the start of the season, is Notre Dame kind of has the tendency of could be like a feast or famine type rushing offense because they have such big playability. But what they don't have, or at least what we haven't seen so far this year, is having a running back similar to Audrich's production last year of just being able to rip off that 6 at a time, 5 at a time, 4 at a time, 7 at a time. A lot of times it's at 2 at a time, 3 at a time, 27 at a time. So going to have to find ways to become a little bit more balanced within the run game, find different ways to take some of the pressure off of Riley Leonard in the run game is another aspect of something that they're going to have to figure out. Not take him out completely, but find ways to get it to where he's not finishing the football game as your leading rusher in attempts. So lots to figure out for the Notre Dame run game, which is interesting to say because that has kind of been the focal point of their offense so far.
I don't have any desire to remove Riley Leonard from the run game. Neither do you. What it comes down to, and this is what you're saying, it's what I'm saying, and what I believe Mike Denbrock was alluding to last night in the press conference was it's like right now Riley Leonard is the driver of the run game, and Jeremiah Love and Jadarian Price are basically compliments to him. That's what it's had to be so far. What I believe Notre Dame wants to get to, and what I think Notre Dame needs to get to, is where he is the complement to Jeremiah Love and Jadarian Price. And it sounds like that's kind of what Coach Denbrock is getting to. But I also understand where he was kind of going into the bye, which is this is just who we are right now. We can figure some stuff out in the bye week. But if we're going to beat these two teams, we've got to have Riley Leonard be more of a focal point of the run game. Now, the Miami of Ohio game was interesting because they actually focused on stopping the running backs, which is why Riley went off the way he did, because they were just giving him running lanes. Louisville did a much better job of what you and I talked about going into the game. They're going to try to dominate Notre Dame with the front and then have the scheme geared towards stopping the running back or the quarterback. And that's what they did a pretty good job of in that game, Trevor, is the D-line shut down the running back run game, and the scheme did a good job of keeping Riley Leonard in check. And I honestly don't think Notre Dame did a great job with their scheme of really mixing things up enough to present any problems for Louisville. So they're going to have to do a better job there schematically. But in this particular game, Trevor, you're in a situation where I believe that this Notre Dame run game needs to do a couple things better. And the reason that I'm kind of encouraged, or I'm happy that they're getting to play Louisville this weekend, Stanford this weekend, is because I do think that Stanford is a legitimate test for your run game to find out if those adjustments are going to take. And when you look at the Stanford front, they're not a real big front, but they play really hard. And you made a note to me when you and I were talking before the show, their linebackers and edge players do an especially good job at block destruction, which is something that helps them. And of course, they're a very veteran group. You've got Tristan Sinclair, who's a sixth-year senior. You got Gathan Bernadelle, who's I think a fifth-year senior in a transfer. They're a very experienced group of players. They get to where they're supposed to get to. They do it physically. They do it with sound fundamentals. And that's really helped them. And when you look at the run game, like we talked about yesterday, Trevor, Clemson went for 5.0 yards per carry. A big chunk of that was because of a long touchdown run by Cade Klubnik on a scramble. If you take that long touchdown run out of the equation, they actually did a pretty decent job keeping Clemson's run game in check. They did the same thing against Virginia Tech, and Clemson's the only team to go above 3.8 yards per carry so far against a Stanford team that's played 3 games, I believe, against Power 5, actually 4 games against Power 4 opponents so far. Stanford is the only non-Power 4 opponent they've played so far is Cal Poly, who, as you mentioned yesterday, they held to 25 yards on 20 carries. They held Syracuse to 26 yards on 17 carries. So I actually felt they did a pretty good job against the run game. Phil Maffa had 58 yards on 10 carries in that game. He had one good run, kind of held him in check for the most part in that game. So this is going to be a good test. If you can run the ball effectively against Stanford, then that tells me that this run game is geared to be successful. And Trevor, you mentioned it. It's not so much about the yards, because we saw that in the Texas A&M game. I mean, like for me, the way I grade efficiency, Trevor, if you're at 60%, 60 to 70% is a pretty good performance. Like that's like good to really good. The closer you get to 70, anything beyond 70 is excellent. They were in the, I think, high 30s to low 40s against Texas A&M in efficiency. They just ripped off a bunch of long runs. That's really what fueled that game. You had the 47-yard run from Jadarian Price. Jeremiah Love had 50 yards on 2 carries. That's 90-some yards on 3 carries. And then Jeremiah had another 21-yard run right before his touchdown, or another almost 20-yard run right before his touchdown run at the end of the game. So you had over half your yards on 5 carries. And then there's a lot of, like you said, 2s and 1s and -2s between that. It's more so, can they create a more efficient ground attack? Because as we've seen against better run defenses, that style of big play can get hurt if you're playing a defense that schematically can somewhat, or has the personnel to limit the big plays. You're not efficient enough to stay on schedule with your run game. And that, to me, is the biggest area for needed improvement. It's kind of funny. I don't know if you watched the press conference yesterday, but they told Mike Denbrock that they're averaging over 200 yards a game rushing, and he was like, we are? He was surprised. And the reason that I believe, knowing Coach Denbrock, that he felt that way is because I don't think he looks at the run game and says, oh, this is a well-oiled machine. I think he looks at it and sees the tackles for loss, the misses, the mistakes, and those type of things. And he's like, that's why sometimes numbers can lie. And they had 2 games they just really dominated a team. 1 game where they had a lot of big runs that pumped up the numbers. But overall, this has not been a super efficient ground attack. It's a dangerous ground attack because of how talented the backs are. But the offensive line is going to have to be a lot better. And honestly, they're going to have to scheme better. This is a very uncreative run game where they do a nice job of finding a new wrinkle from week to week. I thought the run game design against Purdue was excellent. But the last couple games, I felt like they just relied on, okay, here's our new wrinkle, and it's going to be effective. But if they stop that wrinkle, then we don't have anything else to go to. And I think there needs to be a little bit more diversity with the inside-out attack from the run game, and that's another thing that we're going to find out if they're willing to make that adjustment this weekend, Trev.
From the eye test, it almost looks like and feels like sometimes when you're watching the game, the run game is very reliant on one of their big 3 guys just making something miraculous happen, and that's when they're going to pick up major chunks of yardage, which there can be some truth to that when you have explosive threats like Jeremiah Love and Jadarian Price and Riley Leonard, but it's not a sustainable style of football. And every conversation that we're going to start having around Notre Dame's offense is going to be geared towards, now that we're at this part of the season, what are you doing to start preparing to make a postseason run? Because the offense right now is just not going to get it done, the style of what they're running right now. So I know we're going to get into a lot today, but I think some of it is going to be, part of it is you got to scheme better in the run game, 100%. And you need to do different things to free up different running lanes for your guys. You have to kind of shift your mindset from Riley Leonard being the focal point of the rushing offense to being a complement to the rushing offense. And opening up the passing game is going to relieve some pressure on Jeremiah and Jadarian as well. So all things I know we're going to get into today, but yeah, no, 100%, man. The running game is going to be challenged this weekend.
I remember the end of the game against Miami of Ohio. I looked down at the stat sheet and I was like, 270 yards rushing. I didn't feel like they had 270. I mean, I knew they had a good amount, but I thought, maybe 200, like 270. And then you start looking at the stat sheet and you're like, okay, 50-yard run by Riley Leonard, 43-yard run by Riley Leonard, 30-yard run by, Jeremiah Love, 20-yard run by, and you're just like, oh, okay, yeah, that's where it comes from. So I want to see an offensive line that executes better. I want to see an offensive line that's a little bit more physical maybe than it was last week. And I want to see a run game that has a little bit more inside-out mixtures in this game. So we'll see if they're able to kind of get that figured out. But I think the point you nailed, Trevor, and this is where we're going to go next, is the pass game. One of the things that, look, I don't care what you're doing pass game-wise, your run game needs to be more diverse. Not creative, because I think I used the word creative earlier, and that's not an appropriate term, because I actually think this staff does a good job of finding wrinkles and ways to run their top schemes. They've run counter 3 different times in 3 different games because it's a bread and butter play, and they know that we've got to run it differently to be effective against this team, and it's been very effective. Diversity is the word that I'm more looking for. Being able to use jet sweeps a little bit more in your action, and then maybe some power reads off of your jet sweeps. And the thing I like about power read is you're giving the defense something else to focus on besides just keying on 13 when he's on a designed run play. Give him some eye candy. And the other thing, too, is if they then crash Riley, he hands the ball off, and Jeremiah Love or Jadarian Price or Jaden Greathouse or Jaden Harrison or somebody's going out the sideline. And there's some play action wrinkles you can do off that. Just some quick pitch stuff, where maybe you're doing a little edge pin and pull with your tackle or your guard where you're getting the ball out quickly. Because their outside zone is more of an off-tackle play. That's more of an inside run. It can bounce, but it's designed to be cut inside the tight end. I'm talking about things that are designed to quickly attack the perimeter of the defense. And if you can find ways to quickly attack the perimeter of the defense, it makes it a lot harder for defensive coordinators to just crash downhill all game. And so that's what I mean by that, Trevor, is more diversity. So you're not doing that because of the pass game, right? You're not. However, where the pass game can provide more complements is, number one, is doing a better job of protecting the run game, where teams can say, okay, fine, you can gear all your resources towards stopping the run, but we're really going to make you pay for it. And so far this season, they really haven't done a very good job of play here or play there of using the pass game to protect the run game. And that's something that we need to see in this game. And it's not so much like play action. I know that's an easy one to go to. We talked about that yesterday. We need to rehash that. I'd like to see more play action. You'd like to see more play action. We understand why they haven't done more play action. I view it protecting the run game with your pass game first and foremost is not play action. It's throwing out of what you run out of a lot more effectively. So if these are the things we think that we're going to have some success running the football this week with the tight end motions and the different things that they do, then you need to make sure that your run game, your pass game is built around that. I was on a staff one year, and it was my second year on the staff. The year before, we had made the national playoffs, and we had a more talented team, but our head coach took this really bizarre approach where he basically had me go design the pass game in my office each week, and then he had the O-line coach and the running back coach go design the run game in their office, and we didn't work together at all. And so then how we would come up with our script, this is the most ridiculous thing ever, is he would ask each person what they wanted to run. And then that's how we do the scripts. He'd ask the O-line coach, the running backs coach, the quarterbacks coach, me, because I was a pass game coordinator. And then we just keep doing that till we got to our script. And there was never any, and this is the thing I kept complaining about all year, is like, guys, I need to know what they're doing. They need to know what I'm doing. But more so, I need to know what they're doing formationally, personnel-wise, backfield action-wise, so I can make sure that our pass game is designed to complement that. Yes, we're going to throw out of some looks that are throwing alignments, but then they need to mix a couple runs in to that, and I need to make sure that we've got some stuff designed where if we're going to go 21 personnel and we're going to motion our fullback out, we need to have a couple throwing stuff out of that. And it made for a very discombobulated offense where we put up good numbers, but against good teams, we struggled because we couldn't just out-talent them. And I'm not saying Notre Dame does that, but what I am saying is I don't believe they do enough effective throwing stuff out of the more heavy, this is a running alignment, this is a running motion. They run heavily out of this. They need to have some things to say, hey, listen, we're going to line up in this. It's going to look like a run, but we're going to attack you down the field. We're going to attack the perimeter. We're going to do whatever out of these looks. And that includes some play action, but it just means overall your pass game has to be more effective out of your looks that are more, run heavy type of looks. And that's where a week of self-scouting should hopefully really help this staff figure that out. Like, hey, we're not doing enough throwing stuff out of these looks, and that's got to change against Stanford.
It almost feels like I've been waiting for that moment watching their games the last couple of weeks of it feels like they're using certain formations and certain personnel groupings to set something up for later down the road in the game, right? And it just never comes to fruition, which is interesting. I mean, that goes to your point about having, different, it goes to using different formations and different personnel to set it up and use it down the road, whether it's in a different game. They did do it on the screen pass, which is something that you called, but outside of that, it hasn't really felt like they're in that good of an offensive rhythm. It's very drive to drive for them. Sometimes they are, and a lot of times that's on the scripted first drive of the game. And then afterwards, it's just kind of,
this is what we do.
Yeah.
Right.
So I would like to see more of an offensive rhythm from them moving forward. And I think you said it perfectly. It's just using the same formations that you're using for your run game and using it to set up passes behind it. So I'm going to be interested to see what they do to set that up on Saturday.
I want to bring this up here real quick, Trevor, from the original Clyde to Glide. I love that. You probably don't know what he's talking about there, Trev, right? You got to be an old school NBA fan. Clyde says, Brian and Trevor, I'm enjoying your show down here in Florida. My family's in the heart of the hurricane, and it's very scary. However, IB gives me a moment to not think about the cane. Hey, we're glad to be here for you, man. We very much are. And just so you know, we are thinking about you, and we know just your ordinary Joe, one of our longtime OG members, is staying down there too. He's got 90-year-old parents. He's got to stay down there and take care of him because they can't travel. They can't evacuate. So there's a lot of people in those situations, and just know that we're praying for y'all very, very much. And, let us know if there's anything that you need from us for sure. So I appreciate you. Appreciate you being here with us today, Clyde the Glide. Appreciate you very much. Trev, there's some other things that have to happen in the pass game as well for Notre Dame to kind of get going. And here's another reason why I'm very curious to see what this pass game looks like coming out of the break. And as a like when I was a coach, I was a young coach. So it's like when you're a young coach, you're always moving from job to job. My first 5 years, I was at 4 different schools, right? So you understand, like, okay, it can take you a little bit of time to know your players' strengths and weaknesses, especially when you're in a situation where you don't have Riley Leonard all spring. You don't have Bo Collins all spring. You don't have Jordan Faison all spring because he was playing lacrosse. And, you're learning a lot about your football team. And then Jaden Harrison gets hurt, second week of camp. You don't have much of Mitchell Evans in the spring. Eli Raritan's very limited in the spring. So now you're in a situation where you've had all fall camp and 5 games. I'm very curious to see how Mike Denbrock reevaluates his team coming out of the break in looking at, look, coming into the season, I thought we were going to be good at this. We're running this concept a lot. We're running that concept a lot, and it's just not effective. We're just not working. So then you could say, okay, how do we get this stuff better, which is part of it. But the other thing that they need to be able to look at in this game, Trevor, and hopefully have some success is we have to find some things, looking at it from the coaching standpoint, we have to find some things that fit better to what the strengths of our players are, right? If that makes sense. And so, sometimes it can be, all right, look, we like this concept, but it works better when we do it this way. Hey, this concept hasn't been effective, but let's try it with maybe a post-snap switch. Let's try it with a stack where they separate or they quickly cross. Let's try it. Maybe let's look at, how it works out of this alignment. Let's maybe try it with a back out of the backfield. Let's maybe try it with a tight end. And let's also, we're trying a lot of this horizontal stretch stuff. We're not winning a lot of one-on-one, so let's maybe do some other things. Now that he has a better sense of what his players are good at quarterback, at running back, and receiver and tight end, there's a chance for them to be some alterations. And I think this Stanford game is the perfect opportunity to maybe make some of those adjustments, Trevor, because this is kind of where I want to spend my time is the things that I think Notre Dame doesn't have enough of in their pass game, enough motions, enough, not bunch, but stack stuff, some movement bunch, which has been hit or miss for them, some levels concepts, which they very rarely ran, that I know are in Mike Denbrock's offense. Those are all things that I believe, Trevor, watching film, are things that could be very effective against Stanford because of the issues they have. And there's 2 issues that Stanford has. As well coached as they are on offense or on in the run game, they are kind of the opposite in the pass game. And there's 2 things that create problems. Number one is they still try to line up and just let their corners cover. And they don't play nearly as much man as Notre Dame does, but they do play a lot of that. And they do play what I believe to be a lot of pattern match, which essentially turns into man once routes are declared. And simply put, they just don't have the athletes to do that. They don't have the athletes to chase. Notre Dame doesn't have a lot of chase routes in their offense. That is something I'd like to see. A lot of the stop stuff that Notre Dame is doing, Stanford guys defend relatively well. Stops, comebacks, in cuts, that aren't coming underneath, just pure in cuts. I think Stanford defends that stuff pretty well. What they don't defend is the vertical stuff, the deep stuff, and the chase stuff. Those are crossers, overs, drags, double moves, things like that. Those are things that Stanford, simply put, just doesn't have the horses, so to speak, on the outside to do. And so that's where we get into. Schematically, you need to give your guys chances to run. If I'm slow and you're fast and all you're doing all day is running stops and comebacks, that's advantage me, the slow guy. And that's a lot of what Notre Dame is doing. They're going to have to do some things to try to take advantage of their athleticism on the perimeter in a better way than what we've seen so far. And this is the perfect defense to get some of that stuff going against.
Stanford's defense, and you've already alluded to it, does a really good job of coming downhill at every level of their defense, which is why they're so good at stopping the underneath stuff. Talking comebacks, curls, fade stops, routes like that, because their main goal is to keep everything in front of them because they don't have the athletes to keep up with better wide receiver cores downfield. I've been asking for this for weeks, is to give your wide receivers an opportunity to get yards after the catch. That is something besides a tunnel screen, because if you get them 5 to 7 yards down the field on a crosser route and get them into open space, Jaden Greathouse and Jaden Thomas and Bo Collins and Chris Mitchell, who is known for his speed, Jaden Harrison, who was an All-American returner before he came to Notre Dame, they all have ability after the catch. Jordan Faison has ability after the catch. We've seen that. So to your point, I don't want to beat a dead horse, but Notre Dame needs to find ways to get their receivers into space and start making plays, because right now their route concepts are very stagnant. They're very predictable. They're easy to sit on, which at some point is just kind of asking Riley Leonard to throw a pick if that's going to be the only routes that you're going to continue to run.
At some point in time too, Trevor, there does need to be some route improvements. And one of the things that's driven me nuts watching the receivers run routes is DBs know that stuff is coming. And so sometimes it doesn't mean don't run the route. Sometimes it means run the route better. And what's happening a lot is you're seeing the Notre Dame receivers break off a lot of their stop routes at like 9-10 yards. That's exactly where the defense is like, that's their breaking point. And so you'll see a lot of DBs kind of sink for a couple steps, and then right when they're about to flip their hips, which is exactly what you want them to have them do on a stop route, they then stop. The way that I taught that route and the way that I think the route should be taught, and a lot of the best guys do it, is it's not so much a 10-yard route. It's you've got to push vertical, eat up that cushion, and get him to flip his hips. Because if a DB does not flip his hips on off coverage, he's just going to squat on that route. And you're seeing that all game long. And so if you're going to have it be we're running it to a marker, then you need to say, okay, then we're going to push it to 12 to 13. And I think that would time up better too, because if you notice, there's a lot of times where Riley Leonard's stop routes get thrown late. But if you actually watch it, they're thrown late because he gets to the top of his drop and it's not there. It's either not there yet because he's getting out of his drop quickly, but a lot of times it's late because he's doing a drop that requires a deeper route than what they're running. And so they need to push that route more vertically, 12 to 13. If they're doing it off steps, then you need to add 3 to 4 steps onto your route. You know, some routes are 4-step routes, 6-step routes. People teach things differently. And I never liked the step routes except for quick game, because I'm like, well, what if I got a 6'4" guy and a 5'10" guy? Like, those routes are going to look a lot different. And as a quarterback, that can kind of jack you up, especially if you got to win off the line of scrimmage. Like, okay, when do I start counting the steps? You know what I mean? It's like I want an idea of the depth of a route. So everybody does it differently. I don't know how Notre Dame teaches that, but there have been so many opportunities where they were a step away from really getting that guy to flip his hips. And the minute you flip your hips as a DB, I've got a good shot at getting open and beating you on those particular plays. And so those are some route adjustments that they need to do as well that could help them, hopefully help them be more effective.
I agree. Totally. And I think one of the other things that they can do as well is Notre Dame doesn't, from a receiving standpoint, in my opinion, they don't do a really good job of keeping a defense honest. One reason why corners are able to sit on some of those routes is Notre Dame has proven that they're not going to attempt to push the ball down the field. It's all kind of like that domino effect. If you're not willing to push the ball down the field, corners can start to sit on routes. The box starts to get a little bit more bunched in. Your run game doesn't have that much success. So to your point, like we've said earlier this week, I'm not asking for Notre Dame on Saturday to go out and throw 38 go balls to Bo Collins and Chris Mitchell. I'm not saying that at all. But all it takes is those, 2 to 3 shots down the field and stuff starts to open up. I don't think it's a mystery that the most amount of deep shots Notre Dame has taken in a game was against Miami of Ohio. And some of the biggest runs that they had ripped off in the season were also against Miami of Ohio. Good things happen when you push the ball down the field, especially when you have a good receiving core like Notre Dame's. It's just tough because you say Notre Dame has a good receiving core, people immediately go look at the stats, but the talent is there. Route running needs to be refined. wholeheartedly, like you had touched on. But definitely think that another thing that will help them, in addition to improving their like route running technique, is having a couple routes that are going to push the defense deep and get the DB more committed to flipping his hips. Because right now, if I'm Notre Dame, if I'm a defensive coordinator going up against Notre Dame, I'm just asking my corners to sit on routes. And just if they beat us deep, they beat us deep, because that'll be the second time they've done it all season. That's the way that I look at it as well.
And for the love of all things holy, can we please get a double move? Like, just give me something. Give me some kind of double move, something that's going to, cause a team to make a decision. Now, again, here's the problem. This all comes down to the same thing. I know Mike Denbrock uses double moves. I've seen him do it at Notre Dame. I've seen him do it at Cincinnati. I've seen him do it at LSU. Double moves require time. And that goes back to what we talked about yesterday. So it's going to be very interesting to see, how how are they able to adjust the protection to ensure that they can do some of the stuff that we're talking about, Trevor, because that's going to be a big part of this. And then another thing for me too, as I look at this matchup, is you've got to find more ways to get your slot receiver and your tight ends in opportunities for big plays down the field. Stanford's safeties are very vulnerable in the throwing game. Very vulnerable. Very good run defenders. Very good come downhill guys. They're a big reason why Stanford's very good in the run game. But they have got to do a better job, in my opinion, of getting those guys in coverage situations. If they can do that, then Stanford could be in for a very long day, in my opinion, because there's some corner route matchups, some post route matchups, some in cut, some over stuff, some backside seams where you can either ISO it with a backside seam and a front side seam, kind of like what Notre Dame did for the big touchdown against Miami of Ohio. They basically just ran verts from their number 2 and number 3 at a stop route by number 1. 2 and 3 ran a seam and a backside seam and a front side seam. Put that single high safety in a tough bind. That's something that you can do a lot of against this football team. There's other things. If you can hit a couple corner routes, next thing you know, you're hitting with the nod stick, and then you're coming back to the post for a big play with all the single high safety you're getting. So there's a lot of stuff out there for them to do in the throwing game from the inside that I think could really be effective for this team against these teams that are just crashing their linebackers and safeties downhill. That's the thing is, yes, throwing the ball outside is great, but you've got to find ways to get your tight ends and your slot receivers more involved in the run in the throwing game against them, because that's where your matchup advantages are in this game. It's yes, outside, but also you've got some really big matchup advantages here. I've always felt as an offensive play caller that one of the best things to do to attack a team that is geared towards stopping the run is my inside passing game. And what I mean by that is routes to my inside players, because they can be out breaking routes. They can be floods. They can be outs. They can be corners. They can be nods. There's a lot of different things that I can do with them, but using them to attack vertically, because if I can even if some RPO stuff, Trevor, or some stuff where maybe I'm running them off and I'm running a draw, or I'm running something where I got some kind of run game action going where I'm just getting that other team thinking like, hey, they're coming at me. And so I just think those are aspects of it that I want to see this offense get. And I think for the Stanford matchup, it's like, we're not just talking plays we like. These are things that really would work against the specific defense you're playing this week. And I also think, looking forward to the next couple weeks, there are also things that I really like against Georgia Tech. Now, Navy has a really good safety. He was a kid that was on my all-opponent team, Rayon Lane. He was, I think, second-team all-opponent team. He's a really good football player. The rest of their secondary's pretty solid, to be honest with you. So you're going to have to get going in this game to get some rhythm against the better athletes you're going to face the next 2 weeks in the passing game. Neither of them are great pass defenses, but they've got better athletes. And so I think this is an important game for them to say, hey, let's get this going. Let's isolate these things. Let's get this part of our offense going. Let's get good at this, because if they can get the quarterback confident in himself, the offense, and his teammates, that then bleeds into the teammates say, hey, you know what? Now I need to run my routes because quarterback's going to get me the ball. And then they all get more confidence the offensive line can pass, bro. And I don't care how bad Stanford's defense is. That's exactly the point. You've got to get this stuff going in this game. This is a great opportunity to get this stuff going, because if you can build some confidence, like this team just lacks confidence in the throwing game, Trevor. It's hey, I got to break this route off quick because I don't know if the ball's going to come to me. I mean, there's just a lot of this stuff where it's like you need to trust the system more, push that route more, push past that guy, trust that the quarterback's going to get you the ball, trust that the offensive line is going to give him time. You do your job the way you're supposed to do your job, and once it starts clicking, then I think it starts rolling. It won't, it won't be just a one-off, because I do think they have talent advantages against a lot of the teams that they play. They've had talent advantages against the teams that they've played already and haven't been able to take advantage. So that's why I think, Trevor, this is very important to get this stuff going, because this is a very susceptible defense schematically and personnel-wise to what you want to do. And that's why I think it's important that they get those different aspects of the pass game going, on top of, hit a couple big plays from your bread and butter. Do some things. Trevor, and you can speak to this too. One of the things that gives them a lot of problems is when they have to communicate when guys either backs out of the backfield with any kind of rub or wheel or trail or follow route, whether they're doing some stack, post-snap switch stuff. Clemson had a big play in that game against them off of play where it was simple, Trevor. So ran a real quick post-snap switch out of a stack look, and the outside guy ran a post route, and you have two guys standing there, neither of them go cover that guy. And that happens to Stanford quite a bit. And where has Notre Dame got a lot of their big pass plays from this year, Trevor? It's doing stuff just like that. And so I want to see some more of that stuff, in my opinion. And if we can see more of that, then I think that's also something that's going to get this pass game rolling.
Pre-snap motion, I think, is going to be huge. To your point, you alluded to getting your guys in the slot in favorable matchups. And I'm not just talking about sending your tight end in a zip motion across in front of the quarterback just to get him a better leverage standpoint from pass protection. I'm talking send a slot receiver in motion, get him matched up with a safety, get him in a one-on-one scenario. And then again, to your point, Stanford does not do a really good job of communicating post-snap. There was a handful of times against Virginia Tech, handful of times against Syracuse, and a handful of times against Clemson where you had two guys chasing the same route and one person was just left completely uncovered. So Notre Dame did a little bit of that, like they did on that deep ball to Jaden Harrison late in the fourth quarter to kind of get that drive jump started on that scoring drive. So I'm going to hope to see more of that in this game on Saturday, and just playing into more of the weaknesses of what Stanford's defense presents to you. The term that I think of a lot is, take what the defense gives you. And I look at that and I think by nature, there's a lot of people that hear that phrase and they think, keep it simple, keep it underneath. Look, if Stanford's pass or defense is not spectacular by any means, and they do a really job communicating on post-snap switch routes, you need to run those all day long until they prove that they can stop it. So I'm with you. I would definitely like to see a lot more pre-snap motion, spread the field out more horizontally in like pre-snap alignments. So hoping to see a good amount of that on Saturday, because it will start to build on what we're hoping to see over these next 3 games. It's going to be a lot of evaluation over the next 3 weeks until they reach their next bye week for sure.
That leads us into part 2 of today's show, Trevor, and that gets into part of this conversation is about game wreckers. And scheme is great, and you've got to do that. You've got to have good scheme. You got to be coached well. Good offensive coordinators, and I include Mike Denbrock in that conversation. There's different aspects of putting a game plan together. One is, okay, let's find where they're vulnerable. But the other part, and this to me should be the number one thing, is, okay, who are our best players, and what do we got to do to get our best players to football? That should be the number one focal point. And then within that, you then go after, okay, how can we then take our best players and things we like to exploit where they're weaker? Or sometimes it's, hey, how can we use their strengths against them? They're very confident in this cornerback. They just lock him up on our best player. So I'll give you an example. We had a game when I was at Duquesne. Can't remember who it was against, but they basically were just going to take their best corner and a safety and put them over top of our fastest, most explosive receiver that they thought was, which kid named Yard Brantley. So we figured that out in the first quarter. Like wherever Yarden went, they were going to have that stack look, corner and a safety over top. So we started saying, okay, where do we want the ball to go? And then we would utilize Yarden and put him wherever we needed to put him to then open up an opportunity. So we knew if we put him here, we run like a double post. We know that they're both going to run with our slot post the yard, and we're going to bang the outside post behind it. We wanted to run some other kind of in cut. We just run Yarden off on a seam and bring it under. I mean, if we wanted to get a front side combo going, we'd put Yarden backside and they'd go backside. And that's what they were going to do. Now, D1 coaches aren't that stupid and they don't do things like that, but they will say, hey, look, we like our best guy. We're going to trail him, or we're going to do this, or we're going to play this aggressive coverage. It's okay. That's something that they think they're good at. How can we use that to our advantage? Okay, cool. We can get that guy to bite down, and then that's going to open up some stuff over here. So there's things like that. But at the end of the day, it also comes down to you've got to get your top players in position to be successful, and those guys have to play better and have to play well. And so you need some guys, as we've talked about, Trevor, and this has actually not been a problem for Notre Dame. This is one of the few things the Notre Dame offense has done pretty well so far this year, is you need your game wreckers to step up and be game wreckers. And that's actually, as you were discussing earlier, that's actually something that the Notre Dame offense has been doing a pretty good job of this year. Riley Leonard hasn't been doing that in the throwing game a whole lot, but he's been doing a lot in the running game. Jeremiah Love's been doing that. Jadarian Price has been doing that. And that's got to continue, right? Love and Price and Riley in the run game have got to get going. But there's some other aspects of this that I think are worth talking about when it comes to game wreckers, Trevor. And, I want to start with up front. Like, that's where it's got to start. Somebody up front that hasn't been playing well needs to say, okay, I gotta step up and really dominate this game, because the one fear that I have in this game is that the offensive line gets whipped and Stanford's able to create enough inefficiency that Notre Dame struggles to move the ball, and heaven forbid has a couple bad turnovers that give Stanford points. And now all of a sudden, this game that they've got no chance being in, not just winning, Stanford shouldn't have a chance of being in this game. They should not. But that's also true in 2022 when they beat you. And so you're going to need somebody, whether it's Anthony Knapp taking that big step in this game and shutting down David Bailey in the pass rushers, whether it's Rocco Spindler or Sam Pendleton saying, hey, run behind me, whether it's Emil. I don't know who it is, or if it's just the line as a whole. I prefer that it kind of be the line as a whole. This has got to be the number one game wrecker in this game, is that unit has to come out and maybe look, there's a lot of people that think some of those guys should get benched. There's a lot of people talking about how they're what's actually holding the offense back. I'm one of them. Okay, fine. You want to hear that? Get upset about that and go kick somebody's butt? Cool. I'll say it every week if that's what motivates you. Whatever your motivation is, or if it's just pride in the tradition of offensive line play in Notre Dame, whatever your motivation is, find it as a unit, tap into it, and go out there and dominate. Because when this offensive line plays well, and we saw it against Purdue, we saw it late in the fourth quarter against A&M, where the O-line really started to kind of feel themselves a little bit, and they just took it right to Texas A&M. When this line plays well, this offense is really good. The problem, Trevor, it's just been in spurts. It's been a drive or two here, a drive or two there. They've got to do it consistently. And so that's my number one game wrecker right there, is it needs the Notre Dame offensive line needs to have a breakout moment. And when Billy Schrouth comes back, I want there to be some tough decisions about, okay, who do we take out? Because we're playing at a really high level. That's what my hope is when we talk about that is this offensive line. It's got to be your number one game wrecker. Because if they play well, the backs are going to take the game over. I mean, there's no question. Play well, let those athletes take over. That's really the one key when it comes to just really wrecking this game for the Notre Dame offense.
Everything that we've talked about from a skill set standpoint for Notre Dame, the receivers getting open more, Riley Leonard pushing the ball down the field, using post-snap switches, getting your game wreckers into a rhythm in 4 and 24 in the backfield, is all dependent on the play up front. So I don't have much more to add there. I agree with you 100%. And I know this is what you mean. When we mean a breakout moment, we mean a 60-minute moment, right? Like we mean it's not first 2 drives, they're lights out. And then from the second quarter until the end of the third quarter, assignments are being missed. Pass protection kind of takes a step backwards. And then the fourth quarter, they turn it back on. Consistency for the offensive line to me is going to be a huge indicator of if they had a breakout performance, and then continue to build on that and continue to refine that performance and get even better and better and better. And Notre Dame's offense, to your point, is going to become a very, very lethal part of this team, but it all starts up front. So somebody's got to step up. Ideally, it's multiple people, and they start pushing the ball consistently, and it starts up front. I agree.
Can't just be, right? I mean, this is the big game. Everything we talked about earlier, Trevor, when it comes to the skill players, it's a similar situation. Is you need the skill players from Notre Dame to step up and on the outside and say, hey, we're welcome to the party, right? Like, you ever seen the movie Die Hard? One of my favorite scenes is when he throws that guy out of the thing and he shoots up that cop's car, the guy from Family Matters. He's like, welcome to the party, pal. You know what I mean? It's like one of my favorites. It's like, that's what I feel about the Notre Dame receivers. You know what I mean? Like, if they step up and it's like Jeremiah Love, Jadarian Price, and Riley Leonard are kind of like, welcome to the party, pal. You know what I mean? Like, about time you guys showed up. And I don't care if they show up late. I just care that they show up. We need to see a couple of these guys go off. And honestly, I'm at the point now where I don't care who it is. I don't care if it's Jaden Greathouse. I don't care if it's Bo Collins. I don't care if it's Chris Mitchell, Jaden Harrison, KK Smith, Jaden Thomas, Deion Colsey, Micah Gilbert, Cam Williams, Logan Saldate. Did I get everybody? Jordan Faison. Do I have everybody covered? I literally don't care who it is. I don't. Leo Scheidler, Alex Whitman. I don't care who it is. They need a couple guys to really step up and raise their level of play, because I'm hearing a lot of things. Well, this guy's not running hard because of, he's not getting targeted. Okay, fine. If you're not running hard because you're not getting targeted, sit down by me, and I'm going to put someone in there that will gladly run hard and play, because they'd rather be out there doing that than sitting on the bench. Look, that's no, and hey, maybe if you were running better, he'd be getting you the ball more. Maybe if you were running better routes, he'd be getting you the ball more. So there's a lot of different things that I see to say, listen, all the excuses in the world, you guys got to step up and raise your level of play. And if the quarterback's not getting you the ball, then the staff can then deal with that. This is my whole thing, is I can't deal with the quarterback, quote unquote, quarterback issue until the O-line plays better and you guys start getting more separation and you guys start doing a better job running your routes. Do that, and then I can say, okay, look, I have video evidence, coach. The guys are getting open, or we're giving them time. Quarterback's not making the plays. Or maybe, just maybe, if you did your job and you did your job, the quarterback will do his job and the offense will be rolling. Right? Like, that's kind of where I'm at with this, Trevor. I need to see guys step up and thrive. That's my thing. I don't care who it is. I don't care how it works. I mean, there's some things I like that are sustainable, but I want to see at least one or two receivers that come out of this game with a little bit of chip on their shoulder to say, hey, listen, we're pretty good. Because I know this group thinks they're very good, but they don't play like a real confident group. I think in here they think, but there's all these excuses for why they're not playing well. I want to see them come out and play well. Now, if I was a betting man, I'd probably put money on Bo Collins and Jaden Greathouse, because they've been the two that have flashed the most during the season so far. But if it's Chris Mitchell, cool. Let's roll. If it's KK Smith, let's do it. If it's Jaden Harrison, Jordan Faison, Jaden Thomas, I don't care. Somebody's got to step up and not just make a couple plays, but step up and say, hey, I'm going to dominate this football game. Because if a receiver or two steps up and starts making a ton of plays, then all of a sudden you got to look at this team very differently. And it's going to make them a lot harder to defend.
I want to see a wide receiver step up and kind of take ownership of, yo, get me the ball. I'm the guy. Look my way. Third down, look my way. Red zone, look my way. We got to drive down the field. Make me your first read. Right? That's what I want to see, because there's been moments. There's been some. Louisville, you can make the argument it was Jaden Greathouse. Against Texas A&M, Bo Collins had a couple of big catches late in the game, but it hasn't been consistent. It hasn't been, it could be me. And at this point, it could be any pass catcher, to your point. If it's Mitchell Evans and he finally starts turning it on, it could be Mitchell Evans. If Cooper Flanagan comes back healthy, it could be Cooper. If Eli Raridon starts coming into his own in the passing game, it could be him. I don't care who it is, to your point, but I just want somebody to step up and almost have that Mitchell Evans mentality from the 2023 season in that 5-game stretch that he put together, because it was no secret where Notre Dame was trying to get the ball. And he was still, I'm your guy. You make a subpar throw to me, I'm going to reach a big bear paw up there and snag it one-handed in the middle of the Ohio State game. I know a safety is going to be over top of me in the seam. Hit me anyways. I'll take a shot. I'll catch it. Doesn't matter. You need somebody to step up and help, one, build the confidence of your quarterback, and two, build the confidence in the receiver room, because it's a domino effect, right? You see one guy start making plays, and you have a full room full of talented guys saying, I can be that guy. I can go out and make some plays like that. So it needs to be somebody stepping up for sure.
I like that you brought up the tight ends, because that's it too. But I do think at some point in time they do need receivers to step up and make plays.
Yes.
100%. Now, speaking of game records, before we move on, I would like to see them do more with the running backs in the pass game. We've seen it here and there. I would like to see that be more part of their wrecking the game a little bit. I'd like to see some things out of empty with the backs, where they kind of have some design quick game or screens, or even some deep shots with the backs, some things out of your base personnel where you're getting the backs more out of the ball. But them dominating in the throwing game against Stanford is not something that's a needle mover for me. It's great for the offense that they do that, but that's not a sustainable way of beating teams week after week after week. It's got to be a complementary piece to the other pass catchers going off. That's something that I wanted to make a note of too. You need to see that. And I don't know who those guys are going to be. And then the final one for me is Riley Leonard's got to finally kind of put it all together. We've seen everything he needs to do as a quarterback, he's done in 2024. Everything. He just hasn't done it all together. There's some games where he's running at a high level and making great decisions in the running game. There's other games where he's making really good decisions on certain parts of the pass game, where he's getting those like Miami of Ohio is a great example of. He's doing a great job of reading the drop back stuff and getting the ball down the field, and not just the go balls, which he had a 38-yard touchdown pass. He had 3 deep balls that resulted in pass interference penalties on the defense. But then he had 2 great jobs where he read backside to his third read and threw a backside route. But then he misses like real simple quick game stuff, either missing 2 early routes where he just sails the ball over a guy's head, not seeing the easy entry out cuts from the slot where it's like, dude, it's there. I don't know why you're looking away from it. And then there's other games where he's doing that stuff really well. Purdue, he did that stuff really well, but he wasn't seeing the downfield stuff, and so it's like, dude, I've seen you do it all, but you haven't done it all in the same game. He's got to put it all together. And if he can, he can't do that. Well, I've seen him literally do everything he needs to do to run this offense effectively. But the offense can't be effective if most of that's not happening at the same time. And I'm hoping that the first 5 games, getting a chance to kind of come out of the break, self-scout yourself. The coaches have self-scouted you. Hopefully they have a better feel for what he's good at, what he's not good at, and then he can come out and get rolling. Because I'm telling you, if Riley can kind of put it all together of not what he did at Duke, just what we've seen him do at different spots at Notre Dame, put all that together into one performance, then this offense goes off. And this is the perfect time to do it, because you're playing a team that's just not good at stopping the passing game. I mean, it's as simple as that. But, hey, at least they're not good at getting pressure on the quarterback either. There's that. So that's what I want to see Riley kind of take this game over, more so with his arm than his legs. That's my final. And that's not a prediction. That's more of a wishful thinking or a hoping that that's the final game record that Riley Leonard has 8 yards rushing in this game and has over 300 yards of offense. I'd much rather see that than he has 300 yards of offense and it's like 150 rushing, 150 passing against a team that's just not very good, for being honest.
Yeah, the way that I look at it is nothing that Riley Leonard does against Stanford with his legs is going to show me anything new. It's not going to show, he is a dynamic runner. It's like, yeah, we know that.
He did it against A&M and Louisville. I don't need to, you know what I mean? I don't need to see it against Stanford and, right.
Right. But based on Stanford's makeup as a pass defense, got to take advantage of it. Because, Brian, to your point, if Notre Dame and if Riley Leonard doesn't, we start having very serious conversations around this is just what it's going to look like this year. So I think being able to take advantage of Stanford's weaknesses in the pass defense is almost a must. I agree that it's wishful thinking, but it's going to be time for Riley Leonard to go out and put together his first cohesive game of the season. And I know there's some people that are out there saying, "Oh, it's too late. It's too late." No, not necessarily. Notre Dame still has the bulk of their season left. So I will say it is, like I said yesterday, coming up on that time because I don't want to be having this same conversation going into Virginia, and I don't want to be having the same conversation going into USC. But Riley Leonard has the opportunity to go out and put together a really cohesive game, start getting into a rhythm with his receivers, with his tight ends, open up the offense. And I'm really, really hoping to see that because, again, if Riley Leonard can go out and pass for over 230 yards in a game and not make any turnovers and he's still somewhat effective but turns more into a complement in the run game than the focal point of the run game, I am going to be extremely happy Saturday evening. But I got to see it first because as of right now, it is just wishful thinking.
If you had to make a prediction, Trevor, and I'm putting you on the spot because I did not say this to you. If you had to make a prediction of a skill player that has a breakout game-wrecking performance whose name is not Riley Leonard, whose name is not Jeremiah Love, and whose name is not Jadarian Price, who would that be? It's a little fun one. And again, I didn't give him a heads up on this because I just kind of popped in my, it's not even like I'm setting you up, it just kind of popped in my head. Who would you want that to be?
Honestly, I'm going to say Jaden Greathouse for a multitude of reasons. One, I think he's one of the younger guys that can provide a spark. We've talked nothing about younger guys providing that spark on defense. And outside of Jeremiah Love and Jadarian Price, there hasn't been that on the offensive side. There's been spurts. But I think Jaden Greathouse, I think he's really good after the catch, better than what I think some people anticipate him being. And then you go back to the spring. I know we're really far removed from it, but he was that guy that was lining up first for every drill. He was that leader of the receiving room, whether it was from a vocal standpoint or from a lead by example standpoint. And so if he comes into his own and starts making plays after the catch, and I'm not saying he has to go score 2 touchdowns, but I would just like to see a receiver stat line that says, 7 catches for 86 yards and maybe 4 or 5 of those are for third down conversions. And, so I think Jaden Greathouse is one of the guys that can hold the keys to opening up this room, which I would love nothing more to see. That'd be my answer for you. What say you, Brian?
Well, you stole my answer. That's why I wanted to kind of give you a chance first because I didn't want to say my answer because that, just in case I stole yours. But no, I was kind of leaning towards, like I said earlier, Bo or Jaden, just because they're the most known commodities. I'll be honest, I'm hoping that somebody that we're not talking about steps up. Like I'm hoping a Chris Mitchell. I'm hoping that a KK Smith. I'm hoping that one of the people that is geared towards speed and big playability is that guy. But if I had to pick someone, that's okay. I can't take your guy. I'd go Bo Collins. I like the matchups of him outside. If Notre Dame's able to give the quarterback time, I think there's some big play opportunities he can have in this game. That would be my other prediction. If I couldn't go with Jaden because you took him, I'd probably go with Bo. But I would not be opposed because I think we've seen enough from Jaden. He's had some moments. I mean, look at his first quarter against Louisville. He was great, No, excuse me. No, it's Louisville. They had the same touchdowns against Louisville, correct?
Yeah.
Their second touchdown was against Louisville. I keep the back-to-back red and white opponents with similar uniforms is jacking me up. But the touchdown pass against Louisville, he had the big play across the field on the scramble, and we saw him make some clutch third down plays against Texas A&M. We've seen Bo have his moments. It'd be nice if because I feel like they're both kind of close to breaking out. If you could then, one of your Z's kind of steps up and gives you something, then I'd feel really good about where they are as an offense. So that's something I'd like to see. So, Mr. Trowbridge, let's talk defense a little bit.
All right.
Because this is an interesting one. And I have 2 aspects to my breakouts or my potential game records in this game. One is going to be guys that I just want to see have a big game because I really think they're going to be needed over the second half of the year. And then my other one, and this is where we'll start, is there is one game wrecker matchup that I look at because the guy on the other side of the ball can be a game wrecker as well. There's two, but the first one's the big one. And we saw this last year, and that is the matchup of Benjamin Morrison against Alec Ayomanor. And this is obviously their dude, right? I mean, he's a really good football player. Had a big drop. Well, actually, it was what else to call it a drop. It's a pretty good play by the Virginia Tech guy, but I thought he should have been more aggressive attacking the ball on that. It's play I'm talking about, the post route.
Mm-hmm.
He's got to do a better job attacking that football, but the Virginia Tech DB did a really nice job of fighting his hands through the backside and breaking that ball up. But it's a good football player, man. And this is a kid. I mean, you saw it, even though his numbers this year aren't lighting the world on fire. He's got 24 catches and 317 yards and 3 touchdowns in 5 games. Those are good numbers, but they're not, holy moly, this is unbelievably good. What a dominant player. But you go back and look at the Syracuse game. He has 7 catches for 87 yards and a touchdown. But he won the game with just beating Clarence Lewis off the ball and catching a big play that got them into field goal range that won them the game. So even though he wasn't, I mean, up to that point in time, I believe he was averaging under 10 yards a catch in that game, because that was like a 20-something yard gain, right? And he had six catches for like 50, 60 yards before that, and he has that big play and he wins the game. So I mean, you're going down there and you're making the play when it matters. And so even though he hasn't put up like huge numbers, he's made some pretty clutch plays. He's scored a touchdown in each of the last 3 games against Syracuse, Clemson, and Virginia Tech. So this is a guy that if he goes off, as Travis Hunter in Colorado found out last year, and they're not the only ones. This is a guy who made his whole career off of one big game. Go ask Washington, the national runners-up, what they think of him last year when he caught 9 catches for 142 yards and 146 yards and a touchdown. Go ask Oregon State last year when he had 3 catches for 122 yards and a touchdown. This is a good football player. He had 7 catches against Notre Dame last year, but only went for 58 yards because Notre Dame shut him down. This is a big matchup, and we're going to see him go against both corners, but he's going to, at least the way they've used him so far, he's going to be matched up more against Benjamin Morrison. And so in this particular instance, he is a potential game wrecker for Notre Dame, which means Benjamin Morrison against Notre Dame, which means Benjamin Morrison can be a game wrecker against Stanford. Because if you can take this kid out of the game, and that's essentially what Notre Dame's defense allows the corners to do, you take that guy out of the game. I mean, it's just like, I don't know how every elite cornerback doesn't want to play in this defense. I'm serious. Other than just, I don't feel like going to class. It's one of the best corner coaches in college football, and you're playing in a scheme that literally says, dude, this is on you. Go ball. Go show everybody on the planet how good you are. I don't know how any corner doesn't want to play in this defense, and I think you're starting to see more top corners want to play in this defense, hence Dallas Golden, Mark Zachary, right, Christian Gray, those type of guys. But that's where this is at. It's, hey, Benjamin, Christian, but especially Benjamin, need you guys to shut down number 13. If he can't go off, I don't know how. I mean, I don't know if Stanford can, even with help from the Notre Dame offense giving them points, I don't know if they can score enough points to win this game if he doesn't have a strong performance. I mean, so that makes Benjamin Morrison the number 1 game wrecker for Notre Dame because he's matched up against the number 1 game wrecker for Stanford.
Yeah, totally. I'm glad you brought up Benjamin Morrison for a handful of reasons. One, there has been some discussion about him not being what we thought he was going to be. Now, by no means am I saying that Benjamin Morrison is bad. Not at all. But compared to his previous couple of years at Notre Dame, it's been a little bit lackluster, I would say. He's been beat a little bit on the inside in comparison to like all of the games where he's getting interceptions and things like that in comparison to previous years. So I think he has a really good opportunity and a really good wide receiver in Ayomanor. So I'm happy that you put him as a game wrecker because, I mean, one, it makes it a little easy because number 13 is the game wrecker for Stanford on the offensive side. So, yeah, I agree 100%.
I don't know that I would say he's not playing as well as he has. I think there's been a couple plays here and there. I think it's just, to me, it looks a little rusty. And kind of coming off of the injury and missing the spring and things along those lines. I think he looks a little bit rusty. But I will agree that he can play better. There's no doubt I think he can play better. I think outside of Northern Illinois, he's been pretty good this season. And in the last 3 games, if you look at Pro Football Focus numbers, he's given up 6 completions on 16 attempts against what I would argue is, the last 2 games, especially against the 2 best pass offenses they've played so far this season. So, but he has not had that. Here's where I will agree with you, Trevor. He has not had that dominant game, in my opinion, where we've seen him in the past where he would just like, holy moly, he's just dominating right now. I don't think he's had that. And this would be a great time for that.
Yeah.
It was. Because I think the one thing that Benjamin has shown this year is because like I've seen people say like he didn't play well against Louisville and he got bit. And I'm like, go back and watch the long pass play he gave up to Ja'Cory Brooks. As I said, grabbed his face mask and threw him down. All right, that should have been a penalty. Should never have happened.
Sure.
But he wasn't as sharp as he has been in the past. Even in that game, I still think he was good in that game. But he hasn't been dominant. And I think the expectation is dominance. This is the game where he needs to be dominant. And if he can be, Stanford's offense is toast.
Yeah.
Absolutely toast. Now, I'm also curious, how will Stanford do anything to try to get 13 over there matched up against Christian Gray? That's also something not because he hasn't played. I mean, I think Christian's been really good, but more so coming off of an injury.
Sure.
Younger guy. Can you take advantage of that? It's an interesting proposition to consider. What will they do to maybe move that guy around? Will they do some things to try to get him in the slot matched up against Jordan Clark? Do they try to do things to get him away from the Notre Dame corners? I'm curious to see if they do something like that, because I think you have to do that in this game. You have to do some things because against Jordan Clark, who's been very good in coverage as well, but he's 3 inches shorter than the other corners. You know what I mean? Where maybe there's some size advantages, put him in the slot. I'm very curious to see if Stanford's going to do something like that, but they've got to keep him from taking over the game, in my opinion. And if you do that, then Stanford doesn't have much of a chance. My other game wreckers would be potential game wreckers, Trevor, would be the linebackers. And because I really like these young, and I'm right now for this top of this conversation, we're assuming that Ashton Daniels and Micah Ford play because we don't know if they're going to play or not. The linebackers are going to be in space a lot against the running backs, Chris Davis and Micah Ford, and they're going to be responsible for a lot of the contain of Ashton Daniels. If they don't play well, you're going to see some big plays in the passing game to the running backs. You're going to see some missed tackles that result in some 15, 20-yard gains, and you're going to see Ashton Daniels in space because they missed their assignment or they missed a tackle, and that's how Stanford can get some of those chunk plays they need to stay in this game. That's kind of where I'm at when you look at this matchup. Now, if they contain those guys, again, Stanford has very little chance to be, because they're going to need chunk plays against Notre Dame to have any success. Any team that's had success against Notre Dame in the last 2 years has been a team that was able to create some chunk plays. You're not just going to consistently move the ball up and down the field on this Notre Dame defense. And the linebackers are going to be put in a lot of positions to limit Ashton Daniels and those running backs in space, in the scramble game, in the design quarterback running game. They're going to do a lot. They're going to run speed option. They're going to do a lot of different wrinkles. Number one, Trevor, this is what they do. This is what Troy Taylor does. He does a lot of creative things with backfield action in the run game and then backfield action in the throwing game. He's really creative with that. When he watches Notre Dame's team, he's going to say these linebackers are really talented, but they're young and they're prone to mistakes, especially if you get a lot of movement going pre-snap and then cross them up. He's going to come at them in some way. So throwing game and then, of course, tackling in space are things where the linebackers can either not play well, which then allows Stanford's best athletes to make some plays, or they play well, play assignment correct, tackle well, and Stanford's offense does nothing in this game. That's why I have the linebackers also as my next game record for the Irish, where in this particular matchup, they got to play well.
I agree. And I don't have too much to add on the linebackers. I think you hit all the points that I would have brought up. One additional game record that I would bring in, especially just based on injury to the Viper position, is getting some sort of pressure on Ashton Daniels in obvious throwing situations. So I know that we're kind of starting to bleed into that keys to victory territory, but I think one of the people who have a potential to be a game wrecker is somebody that's kind of, I don't want to say unknown, but has a chance to go out and prove themselves in that game, whether it be Bryce Young, Logan Thomas, a junior Tui Alamaka, Josh Burnham coming back into the rotation. Could be RJ Oben, who's deciding to come back onto the scene. So I think whoever is at one of the end positions has the opportunity to be a game wrecker as well.
I like where you're at with that, Trevor, because it's sort of, especially in this situation where you have some guys out. You've got Josh Burnham back. Junior Tilamaka is now the full-time starter now. You know, he's now had time to think about that. You've got Logan Thomas, RJ. I mean, there's a lot of D linemen that have a chance to say, hey, look, it's my chance now. You know, it's my chance to now do for this defense what Boubacar did in a short period of time when Botelho went down, which is, okay, he's down. Let me step up, you know, and make plays. And then Boubacar, who's gonna be that guy? And hopefully it's a couple. I don't know that there's one guy capable of doing what Boubacar did. I don't think Burnham is that kind of pass rusher. I think Josh is probably a little bit of a better all-around player, you know, better against the run. But Boubacar's is different as a pass rusher, you know, and that's just the reality. I don't know if anyone is like that, but, you know, maybe some guys step up and you know, just are able to say, I got this for that. So I like that one. And it'd be a nice confidence boost for the rest of the defense to see somebody at that position really step up. And like Junior Tilamaka is like, hey guys, Patel's great, Boubacar's great, but I got this.
Yeah.
Or Burnham step up and say, hey guys, we're good. We got this. Maybe even a Logan Thomas in sort of a pass rushing situation. And ideally a couple of them. It'd be nice to see Junior and Josh. Because look, these were two of the, I mean, that was a great linebacker class when it signed. I loved Burnham. I always knew Burnham might move down because he was so big and long. You knew he might outgrow the position. I did not anticipate Junior moving down, and I still don't love that move, to be completely honest with you. You know, Nolan Ziegler's had his issues, you know, no longer with the team. Jalen Seed hasn't panned out. So it hasn't really – the linebacker group has not panned out so far.
Sure.
It's got a chance now to really make an impact at that Viper position with Burnham and Tuihalamaka. And it'd be nice to see those guys kind of step up and raise their play and take advantage of the opportunity and step up. I'm going to stay on the D line for my next game record, Trevor, because this is more of a setting the stage for the rest of the season. Mm-hmm. Here's the crazy thing. I was looking at some efficiency numbers and some people posted some on the board, right? And there's some different, you know, there's a lot of different metrics out there. And when you start looking at like efficiency numbers and what I like about efficiency numbers are the ones that kind of take into account like context of who you're playing. And Notre Dame has getting a lot of love when it comes to those ranking systems, the different aspects of how good your football team is. And when I look at this Notre Dame football team or this Notre Dame defense, and I see them doing what they're doing, and they're doing it with honestly what a lot of people thought was two of their, you know, probably two of their four best players coming into the season, along with Xavier Watts and Benjamin Morrison. You know, you start looking at it and saying, well, how good are they going to be if those guys play well? I mean, you look at the Fermo Efficiency Index. He has Notre Dame as the number one defense in college football right now. Ohio State number 2. If you look at the ESPN Football Power Index and their efficiency rankings, they have Notre Dame's defense ranked 3rd behind Tennessee and Texas. I would disagree with Texas because I don't think Texas has been really challenged yet by anybody good on offense. I think Tennessee has played pretty darn good defense so far this season. You know, but every metric you look at, they're either 1st, 2nd, 3rd, or 4th. And you start saying, well, what are they going to do in the last half of the season if Riley Mills and Howard Cross start playing like they're themselves? You know what I mean? Like that's the kind of crazy part about this is 2 of your 4 best players of actually you could even argue, to your point, if 3 of your 4 best players on defense have not lived up to what we thought they would be. Now, I still think Benjamin Morrison's been pretty good, but no, I don't think he's as been good as I thought he was going to be. He's still been pretty good. Howard Cross and Riley Mills have not. And at times they've been bad, to be honest with you. They had their best game of the year against Louisville, the 2 of them. Can they build on that and really take off in the second half of the year? If they can come out and wreck this game, and then that's now 2. Now you say, well, it's Stanford. I understand that, but it's now 2 games in a row where those 2 guys came out and balled out. If those 2 take their games to the level that they're capable, even just repeating what we saw last year, this defense becomes really scary good.
Yeah.
Because I don't know that they're going to face an offense like Louisville's the rest of the year. Couple maybe USC. The option teams are unique, but I don't know that I would put Georgia Tech on Louisville's level. I mean, we watched those two teams play each other. You know what I mean? And Georgia Tech's got some good receivers. I think Louisville's are better. And that game, they didn't have Colin Lacey. He's back now. You know what I mean? So, I'm tell you what, I want to see those two guys go off because I really feel like they're the final missing piece of this defense really becoming scary good and scary good against the run and the pass. That's really something that's why they are my please be game wreckers, please be game wreckers, please be game wreckers for this matchup. Because if Riley and Howard get it going, that helps take the pressure off the edge, to your other point, Trevor, right? But it also, I think, just makes this team, like, now you're just like, okay, now I don't know what to do as an offensive coach. I don't know where I'm supposed to attack now. You know, let's attack the perimeter against their edge players and allow Notre Dame's speed to take over. That's great idea. You know, because right now what teams are able to do is go right at them. That's what Northern Illinois was able to do. Miami, Ohio, to a degree. Louisville's able to do that. A&M started to do that in the second half. Just go right at them. And if those two guys start playing better, you can't go right at them anymore. Not like that. And so that they're my final potential game wrecker for this game and then kind of springboarding into the second half. Because if they start dominating, then the linebackers get even better as well. And now the secondary that's created so many mistakes, they're even more disruptive because the ball's got to come out even quicker. It starts getting kind of exciting to think about, you know, if those two guys really go off. Because that's the thing is, like, when you're playing well, Trevor, and everything's clicking, you're like, look, there's no way you can keep clicking like this for 12. You're going to, you know, but so you're looking at like, okay, Benjamin Morrison hasn't been as dominant as we thought. Jack Kaiser's been okay. You know, Mills and Cross aren't really taking off. Like, yeah, but you still got the number one defense in college football. You know what I mean? Like, what happens if those three guys start going off? And that's why they're all, for one reason or another, part of our game record conversation for this week.
I couldn't agree more. You and I touched on yesterday how hard it is to have an effective passing game when you're getting pressure right up the middle in your face. And Notre Dame's defense has been really good without them. I don't want to say without because, yeah, they're still on the field and they're still playing, but argument
how about
could
this,
be made
without them dominating? How
yes,
about that?
100%.
Because I don't know that I'd say without them because that makes it seem like they're not doing anything.
Sure.
At times, that's been true,
Mm-hmm.
but not completely. But
I
know what you meant. I knew what you meant without them being what we thought they would be.
And now against Stanford, they have the opportunity to go out and prove why they decided to come back to Notre Dame, which is really exciting. I mean, the D-line as a whole, if I'm an opposing offensive coordinator, I'm trying to game plan against this defense. What the ends have the opportunity to do is, you know, if I'm an offensive coordinator going up against Notre Dame, I'm like, thank God they're down to their third string Viper. And then you go and you look and you're like, golly, like we can't game plan against this guy. Well, at least they've been a little underwhelming in the middle of the defense. Oh, well, now they're starting to turn it on. And, you know, so then it's just, I mean, it even goes back to the conversation with A.O. Maynor. Like, it's, all right, well, we're going to move him against Christian Gray. It's like, well, argument could be made that Christian Gray should be leading college football with interceptions this year if he can catch, you know? So it's just, this defense can hurt you in so many ways, and they haven't even unlocked 40% of the ways that they can do it yet. So I love Howard Cross and Riley Mills as two game wreckers. Excited to see how they come out and play. I hope they build off of the momentum and the performance that they had against Louisville, and they use the bye week a little bit to get back in the field room, kind of come back down into their own and say, all right, time to turn it on, you know, take it week by week now and reevaluate what they look like at the next bye week. I'm with you.
That's going to do it for the game wreckers part of this conversation, Trevor. If you could predict, well, actually, no, it's not, because I want to ask you this one. I'm going to have some fun with this one. If you could predict one guy that you think whose name is not Xavier Watts or Benjamin Morrison, who's going to be a game wrecker against this team, who would it be?
I'm going to say Drake Bowen in the run game, because he's one of those guys, another one of those guys that has shown flashes, and those flashes are starting to become a little bit more consistent as the season starts to go on. But I think he really turns the corner after getting back into the film room during the bye week, seeing where he can make his improvements and continuing to build off of the confidence that he's getting, because he's already week over week playing faster and more comfortable.
Mm-hmm.
And I think he really starts to turn it on during Stanford week, which I'm really excited for. Ashton Daniels is a dynamic runner, and I think Drake Bowen has a hand in kind of containing 14 in the backfield. So he's going to be mine.
I dig that. I'm actually not sure where I'm going. I think it's going to be an edge guy, to be honest with you. I like your idea. I thought about maybe Kingston or Jaden Alsbury. I'm going to go with somebody on the edge. I'm going to go with you know what? Here's my game record. Logan Thomas. I think Logan Thomas is going to have a couple big third down or passing situation pressures where he's going to make some big plays. He's not going to play a ton, but when he plays, he's going to have some big plays. I'll tell you who I hope it is. What would be the one, oh, wow, that guy broke out, that you think would be the most meaningful for you for the rest of the season if he can build on that? What would be the one?
RJ Oben would be mine.
Yep, exactly. Mm-hmm. If this is the kind of – okay, again, you got through the bye, get it back into film, figure out what's going on, and become the guy that we thought you were going to be. That's the thing is, Trevor, like Rod Hurd hasn't played great so far, but he's coming off of his best game. RJ Oben was bad the first 4 games. He was not bad against Louisville. He wasn't great by any stretch, but he wasn't bad. He was active. He's playing hard. Riley Mills, Howard Cross haven't really dominated the way that we hoped they would be. Jack Kaiser's still kind of in a transition to a different position type of situation, and you're just like, dude, if the veterans outside of Xavier Watts started playing to their potential, good Lord. I mean, in a lot of ways, this team has been carried by their young guys. Outside of Xavier Watts and Jordan Pizarro and Jordan Clark, this team has been carried so far by its young players. The veterans step up, look out. That's the crazy thing about this defense, because they're not playing like, I don't know how they can play any better. I'm looking at the numbers of the defense. I'm like, they played Texas A&M, they've played Louisville, and I'm thinking like, good Lord, there's like a bunch of things I would want to improve if I'm them. And you can listen to Al Golden talking. Al Golden doesn't think this defense has reached its peak. You can just listen to him talking. You're like, he knows that this defense is going to be a lot better. This is what happens when you're really talented. And that's what Notre Dame fans are experiencing right now on defense. And this is a comment that Brian Kelly made a number of years ago. And he's one of the most accurate things he's ever said is like, look, offensively, I can kind of scheme my way into some success. And you can. And they got to do a better job of it. But when it comes to defense, like it's about the Jimmies and the Joes a lot more than – and now, yes, you've got to be well coached, because we see teams with Jimmies and Joes who suck on defense. But you need – it's like, oh, well, what about Iowa? How many guys has Iowa put in the first and second round of the NFL draft the last 10 years? A lot. They're getting dudes. They're just not highly ranked dudes. With Notre Dame right now, what you're seeing is this is what it looks like when you have good coaching and really talented players. To where in the past, if Isaiah Foskey had a bad game, Notre Dame's defense had a bad game. If Manti had a bad game or Lewis Nix was out, the defense struggled. When we saw that against Pitt in 2012, all the change in that game was Lewis Nix was out in the first half, and that all of a sudden Notre Dame's defense looked average. Yeah. Then they put Lewis Nix back in the second half, and all of a sudden their defense is just shutting Pitt down again. Manti's going crazy and all that kind of stuff. It's like this defense. It's like there's so much speed and athleticism on this defense. There's 7, 8, 9 plays a game where you're like, oh, they're out of position, and it's like 2-yard gain because they're just so fast. As they start figuring that stuff out more and the veterans start playing well, oh boy, it's gonna be a lot of fun. I think a lot of fun to watch.
It's just been from a fan standpoint, it's just such a fun adjustment to watch. Like I was watching Louisville use Isaac Brown and try to get him on the perimeter because he's our fast guy. We don't want to run into the teeth of this Notre Dame defense, and we have speed. And Notre Dame's defense as a whole was faster than Louisville's fastest guy, which is just so fun to watch and see. It's just been such an adjustment from previous teams in the past. So, Brian, to your point, if the veterans start playing like veterans, I mean, that's just going to be
fun.
Yeah.
Very, very fun. So, Trevor, that's going to do it for the defensive portion of today's show. And you know what's next, right? You know what we got coming up next? We're going to have some Buy, Sell, Hold. But before we get to Buy, Sell, Hold, folks, do us a favor. Hit that like button. Hit the subscribe button. Hit the notification bell. Share this podcast. Give us a 5-star review. And, of course, as always, got a couple recruiting intel pieces up on the message board today and yesterday. So you're going to want to check those out. About a D lineman that's going to be visiting here very soon. Got something on that. A little nugget on a quarterback prospect that some people think is a target of Notre Dame, but is not. And we'll have some more recruiting stuff coming up here as we get closer. Now that they're out of the bye week, they've kind of zeroed in on what their needs are, and so you're going to start hearing a lot more in that regard as well. So I have another intel piece coming up here later tonight, just kind of with an overview of where things stand with the recruiting. But that's only going to be found on the premium message board at boards.irishbreakdown.com. Did I mute myself? How long have I been muted?
Since you broke the transition, I think, to the.
Okay, so I said about I just talked about all the intel stuff and all. Okay, cool. I don't know why I muted myself. That's weird. I don't know. Guess I wasn't ready for Buy, Sell, Hold. All right. So what I was asking you, Trevor, is are you ready for Buy, Sell, Hold? Because I mean, I'm just curious. Vince loves this and he loves the mailbag. I'm just saying, are you ready for Buy, Sell, Hold? Because we had some really good ones today, some really good submissions today. Are you ready to rock and roll with the Buy, Sell, Holds, my friend?
I'm ready. I love Buy, Sell, Holds. Let's get after it.
Yeah. So we're obviously the way that this works, as you guys remember, everybody knows that this is a for premium members only. So that's why we tell you to sign up for the message board, because this is one of those things that we do. It's one of the perks that we give people who are premium members of the Irish Breakdown community at boards.irishbreakdown.com. And so what we'll do is we'll bring up your submissions. We have a post every Tuesday that Salty puts up, and then you put in your Buy, Sell, Hold submission. It's basically you make a statement, essentially. You make a submission, and then we're either going to buy it, we're going to sell it, or we're going to hold it. And we try not to do a lot of holds, but occasionally we have no choice. And if you did not get a submission in and you want to get one in, or you're not a premium member, first of all, I would say is if you're going to give me a $4.99 super chat or a $10 super chat to get a Buy, Sell, Hold and you're not a member, I'd say take that money and go become a member. And then you can get one every week and not have to pay for a super chat. So you're going to have some fun. You're going to have some fun. So with this one today, Trevor, but we did have a super chat that I wanted to get to from AST12321. Excited for the show. Thank you for that. I hope to see all of it, riding the storm out. So he is down in Florida, it looks like. And man, I got to tell you what, dude, we need you to stay safe and stay healthy out there. All right, man. I know there's some people they're making the choice to ride it out, and just pray that they're safe and pray that you guys are able to get through this without too much damage to your property. And of course, hopefully we pray that there's no loss of life in this big storm that's coming at you. So there's like already tornadoes hitting, and it's going to be a big one. So we pray that you guys are able to make it through it. So we appreciate your super chat, man. And we'll be thinking about you. So let's get that. We got that out of the way. And we appreciate that very much. Now, Trevor, it's time for Buy, Sell, Hold. And we're going to basically go up until about a little before 5 o'clock. When the next show starts. So we're going to try to rock and roll through these as quickly as possible and get as many of these as we can. So, Mr. Trowbridge, why don't you go ahead and get us started, and we'll kick things off with Indy alumnus in Minnesota.
Let's do it. Buy, Sell, Hold. The linebackers have played faster and more decisively in the last 2 games compared to the first 2 games of the season.
That's an easy buy, Trevor. I mean, we kind of talked about this. If you go back and watch the first game, there were some flash plays. You mentioned it, flash plays from Drake, flash plays from Kingston, but a lot of, I'm not quite sure where I'm going. Same thing against Miami of Ohio. The last 2 games, and they started to see it a little against Purdue, but the last 2 games especially, I think the linebackers have gotten better and better and better. And I think the thing too, Trevor, is we're still seeing them make mistakes. But the difference is they're making mistakes fast. And they're playing hard. I mean, 2 of the biggest mistakes Kingston's made all year were in the most recent game, in my opinion. But he also made a lot of plays because he's just playing hard. And there's something to be said about that. look, I've said it, Trevor, you've heard it. I know every coach that's coached that's good, every player that's played that had a good coach has probably heard this expression or some version of it. Give me everything you got. I can live with mistakes as long as you're giving me everything you got, right? If you're going to make a mistake, make it 100 miles an hour, however you want to use that phrase. And you're seeing those linebackers do that, but they're also making fewer mistakes. It's just, they're playing hard. So, yeah, way faster, way more decisively than they have in the first two games. It's not even close.
Couldn't agree more. It's fun to watch them start to come into their own, and the athleticism is starting to flash. So excited to see what that starts to look like in week 9 and in week 10, because they're just going to keep getting better. Buy, sell, hold, Domer Grizz. A healthy Billy Schrouth could help at left tackle if the staff is happy with Rocco Spindler's performance at right guard.
Sell. I'm definitely selling that. I don't think Billy Schrouth is a left tackle. I said coming out that I thought Billy Schrouth could play right tackle if needed be. I like him at guard. I think he's a better interior player. He's got the demeanor for it. His body is more built for that. I think he's definitely has more, not that he's got short arms, but he doesn't have like the ideal length you want at right tackle. He can be, or a tackle, he can be a good road grader as a right tackle. He's a guard, and I definitely am not putting him at left tackle for two reasons. Mainly, besides that, is number one, he's been playing right-handed the last whole year at right guard, and number two, he's been playing in a phone booth for his entire career. He's now a junior. You're now going to put him in space and ask him to handle that. I don't think that would go well. Now, could I see them moving him if they're happy with Rocco's performance? Sure. If they think Rocco Spindler's one of your 5 best, then I could see them saying, hey, let's move Billy over to left guard, perhaps. Maybe move him to center where he has played in the past. I don't know that I would do that. That's an example. But I would definitely not move him to tackle. Certainly would not do that.
I agree. I'm with you. Domer Grizz with another buy-sell hold. Anthony Knapp's improvement against Louisville was more about Louisville attacking the right side of the offensive line than it was about him actually having his best game, in quotes, of the year.
All right, I've spoken about this one already, Trevor, so I want to get your thoughts on this. I'm selling this. I've already talked about this. I think you can't take, even if they were doing that, he still has to win one-on-ones. He hasn't been winning. Was he great? No. Was he improved? Was it about something Louisville did? I don't think it was, Trevor. I'm curious your thoughts on this, but I'm selling this because I think he played better. I just think things he was not doing well, he was doing better against Louisville, who has a pretty couple pretty darn good edge players. So even in one-on-ones against his, is it Ford? Is it Jones? What's his last name? You know what I'm talking. Logan? Is it Tremel Logan?
Yes.
Okay. Tremel Logan. It's a pretty good edge player. He leads their team in sacks. They've got Ashton Gillott over there as well. Like, even if you're just going one-on-one as they're attacking the right side, you still got to play pretty well against that group. So I'm selling this, Trevor. I'm curious what your thoughts are, like what you saw from Anthony Knapp in this game. Again, not that I'm saying he played great. I just think he played better.
I agree. I'm selling this as well for a handful of reasons. One, for what you said, so I'm not going to dive in too deep there. Another thing, the reason why I'm selling it is I don't think it was so much Louisville attacking the right side of the offensive line. I think there were things that Mike Denbrock did schematically that helped Anthony Knapp's performance, but at the end of the day, you still have to execute that game plan. That's not something that you can take away from Anthony Knapp. There were a lot of sprint outs to the right side instead of just straight dropbacks, which I think helped Anthony Knapp a little bit in just that one-on-one pass protection standpoint. But again, he still had an assignment to do, and on paper and on film, he performed better in pass protection than he did the entire rest of the year. I think he graded out at like a 63.5 against Louisville, and his next closest game was like 39%. So there was obvious improvement. I don't think you can take that away from Knapp. So Brian, I'm with you. Buy, sell, hold. I am Tenzin. Miami is the next team to lose undefeated status.
Let me pull up the schedule this weekend, Trevor, because I do think there's a couple undefeated teams that could go down this week. So obviously, let's see here. Miami. This Miami. off this week. Yeah, Miami's off this
Yeah.
week, so that kind of factors in to it as well. So if you look at the undefeated teams this season, Trevor, I mean, let's just kind of go down. There's no undefeated teams playing Thursday or Friday. Though there's a great 4-1 versus 4-1 game that I'm looking forward to seeing tomorrow night at 10:30 or Friday night at 10:30. That's going to be that Utah at Arizona State game. But we saw a lot of undefeateds go down, and let's go down here and find these games. So you got Texas against Oklahoma in a rivalry game. And then next week, Texas plays Georgia. Now, I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking about that, Trevor, because we have a BISO hold about that coming up. But Texas is undefeated, and their next couple games could get interesting. Now, Miami's next game is the 19th, and they play at Louisville. And obviously that's a big game for both teams. I'm concerned about that matchup because Louisville's not great at defending the pass, and Miami is a pretty decent passing team. They're a little hit or miss. But you've got Penn State at USC. So Texas and Oklahoma rivalry game. Penn State at USC. That's going to be a tough game. That's a potential undefeated team that could take a loss this weekend. Louisville won't lose 3 in a row. They play Virginia this weekend. Yeah. BYU hosts Arizona. I mean, I predict BYU to win that game, but that's a scrappy Arizona team, coming off of a bad loss. They're going to have their kind of backs against the wall a little bit in the Big 12 after getting beat by Texas Tech last weekend. That's a potential one that I'm looking at for this weekend, Trevor, that could potentially be an undefeated that goes down. And then here's the final piece of the puzzle. I mean, I'll do this one last. There's a couple other undefeateds that could go down this weekend. Iowa State plays at West Virginia. West Virginia is a scrappy team this year. I can see that one going down. But here's the answer to it all. Miami doesn't play this weekend, and 2 undefeated teams play each other. Ohio State and Oregon. So it has to be one of those, right? Now, where I went with the other direction is, okay, who's an undefeated team that's going to lose to someone that's not? That is where I bring up those other teams, and that's where Miami could be in that conversation, right? To try to give justice to that thought process, because Miami plays Louisville at Louisville next weekend, Trevor. But an undefeated's losing Saturday. It's guaranteed unless a game gets canceled. And I don't see how a game in Oregon is going to get canceled because of the weather. An undefeated's getting beat this weekend, at least one. There's others that potentially I think that you can make a case that multiple undefeateds will get beat before Louisville because of there's multiple teams that undefeated that could lose this weekend. Right. And I actually think it will happen. I actually think multiple undefeated teams are going to go down this weekend, Trevor. That's going to be y'all will see in my predictions tomorrow, but I got a few, and Texas will not be one of them. But I have multiple undefeated teams getting beat this weekend, and one of them has to. Oregon or Ohio State, one of them's going down this weekend because they play each other.
Yeah, I agree. Unfortunately, I have to sell this. I understand where it's coming from because I think Miami is significantly closer to having 2 losses than they are to remaining undefeated. But just for the slate of college football and the games that are happening, have to sell it because it would be statistically impossible for there to be, a remaining undefeated team. Or for there to not be an undefeated team to lose this weekend before Miami.
When I was growing up, Trevor, it could happen because we had ties when I was a kid. But fortunately, there are no more ties. I'm very happy about that there's no more ties. But yes, I think by next weekend, we're going to have very few undefeated teams. And I'll just hold off on that, more on that here till we get to the next one.
Sure. I am Tenzin again with a buy-sell hold. Indiana is a legit Big Ten title contender if they beat Nebraska.
There we go. If they beat Nebraska, that's next weekend because Indiana's off this weekend. So that's next weekend. If they beat Nebraska, they're 7-0. I have 2 answers to this. One is more drawn out and trying to give respect to the question. The other one's short and sweet, and I don't want to disrespect the question. So they got Washington this weekend. The weekend after. That's a winnable game. At Michigan State's a winnable game. Michigan at home is a winnable game. They end the season with Purdue. It's a winnable game. The only game that I think they have that's not winnable is at Ohio State. So with that in mind, if they beat Nebraska this weekend, there's a chance that they could absolutely earn a spot in the Big Ten title game. That's as far as I can go with it, though. they're not going to win the Big Ten because it's going to be a lot like in the past where somebody had to win the West and get to the Big Ten title game, but they weren't actually going to win the Big Ten. And if Indiana gets there, they're either going to be playing Ohio State or Oregon, and I don't think they can beat either one of those teams. Or I should say Penn State. Now, Penn State's a team they probably have the best chance to beat of those three. But I don't think Penn State's going to be there. I think it'll be Ohio State or Oregon. And my pick is Ohio State. So, yes, while I think they get there, I do not view them as a legit title contender because I don't think they'd have a chance in that matchup. But I still don't – I mean – I love what Cignetti's doing. They're a legit good team this year. Am I ready to quite put them on that pedestal? I'm not yet because this is still a team whose best wins are over Maryland and Northwestern. Now, here's what I like about them. Here's the counter to that. They've yet to have a close game, right? So, it's like you can say, well, they haven't beat anybody. I get that. But they're not exactly perfect example. The Maryland-Indiana game was close in the third quarter. It was 28-21 at the end of the third quarter, but then Indiana scored at the beginning of the fourth quarter to make it 35-21. They scored again to make it 42-21. By the time Maryland scored at the end of the game to make it competitive, so it's like they have yet to play a four-quarter game, Trevor. And that's not because other teams aren't good. It's because they're finishing teams. I mean, they were beating Indiana by 10 in the fourth quarter, and then Indiana gets a touchdown to make it, and then Indiana goes right back down the field and scores to go back up 10, and then they put the game away with another touchdown. So, they've been handling business against teams that are not as good as them. Got to give them credit for that. But the schedule ramps up a ton for them down the stretch, and I don't know that they can be good enough to get there. But if they beat Nebraska, then that tells me, okay, now they are showing me something. And then if they, so each week they win, the more and more they become that contender. But I still feel like there's the cream of the Big Ten is still Ohio State, Oregon, and Penn State. In no particular order. The only particular order is Ohio State's number one. I don't know that I necessarily have a great feeling on who's number two between Oregon and Penn State because neither have lit the world on fire. They've both been very good, but which one's better? They both have some holes they still got to work through so far. But Ohio State's clearly the best team in the Big Ten. So I would sell that. They are a legit contender to win the Big Ten. I would buy it if you were to say, are they a legit contender to make it to the Big Ten title game? If they beat Nebraska, yeah, I'd say they're in that conversation. I would.
IU is an interesting team to me because you have to look at what the program did historically, right? Because on one hand, you say, oh, well, they only beat Maryland and Northwestern. Well, in years previous, like last year, they lose those games, right? So this year, not only are they winning, they are handling business. Now, the one thing that I will say is it is super exciting that they started out 6-0. I live in Indiana. I have no beef against IU. I think it's good for Midwest football. I think it's good for the state of Indiana. But looking at it from a football standpoint, I'm not ready to say, and I know this isn't what the buy, sell, hold is saying, but I'm not willing to say, well, they beat Maryland and Northwestern. Now they can compete with Oregon and Ohio State. So right. if they beat Nebraska, I think that conversation becomes a lot more interesting. But I don't know, just by the makeup of the teams that they have left on their schedule, I don't know if they can. I think Michigan is a winnable game, but I also think Michigan is significantly better than Northwestern and Maryland. I think that they have a handful of winnable games on their schedule. But again, to compete for the title,
there's also several they could lose.
Yeah, that's exactly.
Because Nebraska's not a Big Ten title contender either. So beating Nebraska at home doesn't mean bring on the Buckeyes,
right? Bring
on the Ducks and the Nittany Lions. It doesn't mean that. It means, okay, of the second-tier teams, you got a shot to be the best of that group, including better than Michigan. But that's a whole different animal, to your point, than being number one. And look, if you're an Indiana fan, stop thinking about the Big Ten title game. Yes. Because otherwise you're going to get disappointed if they don't make it. They have already surpassed my expectations for them this season. They've already won more games than I thought they would win.
100%.
And they've looked really good doing it. Enjoy the ride. Whether they're 12-0, 10-2, or 9-3. If they lose 3 of their next 6 games, let's say they lose to Ohio State, lose to Michigan State, and drop one of Michigan, Washington, and Nebraska. Okay, and they go 9-3. Don't be disappointed, Hoosier fans, because even if they lose to Ohio State, Michigan State, and let's say Nebraska, that means they still beat Washington, they still beat Michigan. You know what I mean? Like, if they lose to Ohio State, Michigan, and Washington, that means they still beat Nebraska and they still beat Michigan State on the road. Like, there's a lot of good wins on there. If they go 9-3, if they go 8-4 and lose two of their last – guys, you still have made a tremendous improvement from where this program is coming from. Be excited about that. And here's the other thing. You better be careful not to win too much. Otherwise, you might only have your head coach for a year. So you may want to chill with some of that. Let's get to the Big Ten title game, because then you're pretty much writing a guarantee that Kurt Cignetti is going to be coaching somebody else next season. I'm just saying. But no, he's done a great job so far, Trevor.
Yeah.
And again, 6-0 is one thing. And yeah, they haven't beat anybody that's really impressive. But sometimes it's not who you beat, it's how you beat them. And they're smacking people.
Yeah, they are.
But also what I like is they have been tested somewhat in the second half of a couple games, and they just pulled away from those teams in the fourth quarter. That's coaching. That's toughness for players, mental toughness, physical. There's no, we're back to being Indiana again. It's like, no, we got this. We got this. So really impressed with what they're doing. But no, just let's enjoy what they're doing and not start trying to compare them to – because otherwise, you know what I'm saying, Trevor? Otherwise, you're going to get disappointed. They're going to lose a couple games like, season has such great promise. The season is already a success for Indiana. You know, unless they just lose their next 6 games – this season is a success, no matter how it goes. It's just what degree is that success going to be. But as soon as some of y'all Hoosier fans start kind of getting into this, hey, we can play with this team, then you're going to get disappointed when they lose a couple of those games. And then you start not enjoying what has been an awesome year so far for that team and what I think will continue to be that. Because you watch them play, Trevor, you're like, they're a good football team. It's not fluky what they're doing, dude. It's not. We're saying, like, man, how bad is UCLA that they got killed by Indiana? And then UCLA goes out in the next few games and they're losing every game. But you know what? They were a whole lot more competitive against those teams than they were against Indiana. You know
100%.
what I mean? Like,
100%.
UCLA competed against LSU. They were very competitive against Oregon. They were very competitive against Penn State. They had no chance at winning, but they kept those. And Indiana pounded them. So they're having a heck of a season so far. So just enjoy it and don't try to ruin it by putting unfair expectations on what this team is going to be this season.
Mr. Emil Wagner, buy, sell, hold. The Riley Leonard hate is actually a good thing because it will motivate him to go out and show everyone he is more like the 2022 version than the current version. Passing-wise, only because running-wise, he is elite.
I mean, I would hope that Riley Leonard is motivated by a lot. I'm going to sell this because I would hope that Riley Leonard is motivated by more than what fans are saying about him. If you need fans being fans and saying dumb things to motivate you, then I would question your internal fortitude. I would say maybe you're not looking at things the right way. Somebody in the chat said, "Sell, Riley Leonard doesn't care." That's kind of where I'm at. And honestly, if I knew that the only reason Riley Leonard went out and performed better in the second half of the year is because he was mad at what fans said about him, I'd say, bro, you got some real immature priorities right there. Now, again, sometimes fans saying things can maybe make you enjoy when you get it going more. That's absolutely human nature, and I would understand that. But if that's your motivation for playing better, not your teammates, not the NFL draft, not winning a championship and all the reasons you came to Notre Dame, it's like, no, it takes fans hating on you to motivate you. Number one, fans, we don't matter that much to where we're motivating players to work harder and be better. So that's us thinking we mean more than we do. Not that fans aren't important, but like that's not what's driving your football team. Does it mean that maybe they might enjoy turning things around more? That I would say is true. But if Riley Leonard is motivated to play better, which I believe that he is, it's going to be because he wants to do right by his teammates. He wants to win. He wants to impress NFL teams. All those other reasons. I would say, proving the doubters wrong is not even in his top 20 reasons of why he's motivated to go out there and be a better version of himself. It might be in the top 5 of things that give him joy when he actually does play better. That's different than what's motivating me to perform in that manner. Does that make sense? So
Totally.
I'm selling that.
I'm selling that too. I just don't think the Riley Leonard hate is a good thing in any aspect that you look at it. Because one, to your point, I don't think Riley Leonard's motivation to get out of bed every day is to prove Irish Nation wrong. I just don't. One. Two, I'm a firm believer that constructive criticism and criticism of people on your favorite team is healthy, and I think that you should. I don't think you should err on the side of 100%.
And I believe, one of the quote unquote fan rights. Like you support this team, you pay money to go there. You should be allowed to be critical of the team as long as you don't act like a moron.
Totally. But the hate is just it's not a good thing in any scenario. I don't think it's healthy for the fan base. I don't think Riley Leonard pays attention to it, if I'm being honest with you. Or if he does pay attention to it, I don't think it's his motivating factor for getting out of bed every day. So no. I still
if it was, he won't play better. That's not something that can truly drive you to read defenses better, to make better throws, to use your technique correct. It might be why I run a guy over, but it's not that. And normally when somebody uses the word hate, I normally dismiss it because I get so tired of people that say, well, I disagree with you on Steve Angeli, so why are you a hater? Me not thinking Steve Angeli is a very good football player doesn't mean I'm a hater. It means I made an evaluation that I'm either going to be right or wrong about. It has nothing to do with hate. In this case, though, I do see legitimate online, especially hatred of Riley Leonard, which says way more about those people than it does about the performance of Riley Leonard. Now, criticism of Riley's performance, which we see a lot of in the chat, some of the stuff that's said about Riley in the chat is childish and ridiculous. Most of the posters in the chat, whether I agree or disagree with them, Trevor, have legitimate criticisms of his play that needs to be better, and that's very valid.
Yes.
And to your point, I don't like this. Well, we're fans. We should support the team no matter what. When I pay $500 for a flight and I pay $150 minimum for a ticket, depending on which game I'm going to, I might be paying $500. When I got to pay $15 for a Coke and $12 for a hot dog and $50 for parking, and you go out there and play half butt and don't even act like you care, I'm going to feel a certain way about that.
Totally.
And I have the right to express that in certain ways. I just say we got to make sure we're doing it in healthy ways because then that starts to reflect on us. But, I mean, being critical of your team, that's part of being a fan. As long as it's being done in the right way. And I think most Notre Dame fans do it the right way. It's just the people that don't like to hear themselves talk or like to see their words in whatever print or whatever more than others. And it comes across that way. People that like to say vitriolic things like to say it more than people with normal rational thoughts. Because most people normal rational thoughts just assume that everybody else thinks normal and rationally. So they don't need to express their normal rational thought. People that think ignorant things or hateful things tend to feel like, no, I got to say this to everyone so they know how dumb I am. Somebody said, do you think social media has created this? I said, no, to a degree, but I think social media creates groupthink more than we've had in the past. But I think what it's done is it's given those people that would just scream at their TVs and write hateful letters and do all that it's given them an easier platform to show everyone how stupid they are. And there's, that's what it's done for that group of people. But most fans are not the majority of the fan base is not reflected by the lowest common denominator on social media. That does not reflect when a Notre Dame fan jumps or any fan jumps into some player's DMs and says hateful things to him. That doesn't reflect 99.9% of fans who just want to wish the kid the best. They may not like how he handled his business. They may not respect the kid, but they're not going to say anything to him because they're adults and they're normal human beings. The person that tweets hateful things, that's then look what this Notre Dame fan said. Yeah, 99.9% of Notre Dame fans are going to say that guy's a moron and he doesn't speak for us. Right? But those people tend to tweet more and post more and say more because they just like to hear themselves talk. You ever notice that? Like the dumbest people among us are the ones that like to be heard the most. I should probably not say that because I talk a lot, but in certain instances, that is true. So I normally hate when people say hate. I despise that because it's like thinking Riley Leonard's not an accurate passer isn't hate. It's an evaluation. Thinking Riley Leonard didn't read defenses very well the first couple games is not hate. It's an evaluation. Right or wrong, it's an evaluation. Saying Riley Leonard sucks and they should take a scholarship, which I've seen said, okay, that's moronic. That's not criticism. That's just you're being an emotional infant, and that's what I despise. But most people aren't that way. We respond to those people more, which is our fault, to be honest with you, and we're going to try to correct that more. But most people aren't that way. And I think Riley Leonard, because like these kids get a lot of love mail too, and I don't mean like love, like, oh, I love you, but like, hey man, keep your head up, keep working hard, keep doing what you're, and they get some of that too. And I hope that more of them are focusing on that than the stupid things that are said. So that's my 2 cents.
Mr. Emil Wagner again, buy, sell, hold. Having the ability to just make plays in the passing game at critical moments in the game is the only thing holding Notre Dame back from becoming a serious championship contender.
I'm going to sell that from the standpoint of it's not the only thing. I think it's the main thing. I still think the run defense needs to get better to be a championship contender. But it's well below the ability to make plays in the passing game, especially in critical moments. So I will half sell that because it's not the only thing. If you would have replaced only with main, major buy, easy buy, but it's not the only thing. It's the main thing, in my opinion, Trevor.
I agree. I'm going to take a different route to this one. I agree with everything that you said. I'm going to put a hold on this until after Saturday. Because like we've just spent the last couple days talking about, Stanford's pass defense is not good. And Notre Dame has obvious matchups that they need to take advantage of. And if we get put into a position Saturday evening where we sit down and we talk about this is just what the Notre Dame team is this year, they just can't push the ball down the field, then maybe. But for the most part, I don't think it's the only thing. But like I said, I'm going to hold on it until after Saturday because who knows? Defense has the opportunity to step up and make plays, and veterans have the opportunity to prove why they are veterans on this team. And if Notre Dame starts getting a little bit more creative in the run game, then we might be put in that position. But as of right now, today, it's not the only thing that's holding them back. Buy, sell, hold again from Mr. Emil Wagner. Ashton Jeanty should win the Heisman Trophy.
Hold. There's another question about him coming up that I'll speak on that then. But we're 5-6 games into the season. Let's let the season play out. If I were to say who's the front runner today, okay, yeah, sure. But the guy that should win the Heisman is the guy that dominates for an entire season, not a guy who was the best player through the first 5 or 6 games of the season. So I'm going to hold on that one.
Yep. Buy, sell, hold. PQ, what it do? The Big 12 champ won't get a bye in the playoff.
Sell. Now, the premise, because somebody in the chat on the site said, well, they have to get it. And there's this misconception that the 4 Power 4 teams get the automatic buys. No, the 5 highest ranked conference champs get a bye. And one of them, now it used to be, it was 5, like the 5 Power 5s all got automatic bids, and then the highest group of 5 also, correct? But I think is what it was. But the rule now, and this is what I do know, is it's the 5 highest ranked conference champs get an automatic bid. They don't need to have the group of 5 thing in there anymore because there's only 4 Power 4 teams. So if, let's say Boise State runs the table and they finish 12th and Utah ranks 14th and they win the Big 12, then Boise State gets one of the first round buys. I just don't think that's going to happen. Right? I mean, I just don't think that's going to happen.
Yep. So I agree. Another buy, sell, hold from PQ. What it do? A non-quarterback will win the Heisman.
Again, I'm going to hold that overall, but I think this is one of the best one of the years where there's the best chance of that happening for 2 reasons. Number one is there's some really special non-quarterbacks in college football this year, in my opinion. I thought a lot in the past, a lot of the hype about Travis Hunter was a lot. It was hype. It was a lot of hype. The talent was there, but he wasn't as good as people made him out to be. This year, I think he's been legit really good, especially on you know what it is for me, Trevor. I have changed how I perceive Travis Hunter, how I evaluate Travis Hunter. Here's what I mean. In the past, I would evaluate him as a corner who also played receiver, and I'd say, but he's not that good of a corner. He's talented and makes some great plays, but like snap after snap. Now I evaluate him as a receiver who also plays corner. And it's kind of changed my thought process. Now, he's gotten better at corner. Don't get me wrong. He's gotten a lot better at corner. But he's on pace for 1,200 yards receiving.
Yeah.
And he's on pace for like 6 or 7 interceptions on defense. That's pretty dynamic, and so I see a kid that's becoming what the play now matches what the hype has been. Is that fair to say? And where in the past it was a lot of talk and not a lot of substance about him. Now I look at him and I'm like, this kid's actually matching that level of play to a degree. And the other thing I like about it too is he's made plays in big games. He's caught minimum 7 passes of every game. He's had at least 100 yards in all but one game. He's made clutch plays. He's on pace for, he's got 46 catches, 561 yards, and 6 touchdowns in only 5 games. That's pretty good. And that's really good. He ranks 8th in the country in receiving yards, and half the guys ahead of him have played in more games. So yeah, he's a dominant player in my opinion. I don't know that he's a Heisman candidate because he's not getting enough attention, but the kid from Ole Miss is on pace for a monster season. Trey Harris. Like he is on, Trevor, he's halfway through the regular season. He has 52 catches, 885 yards, and 5 touchdowns. Like he's on pace for a monster season. Like, and he didn't get targeted a ton against Ole Miss. He's on pace for a really big season, in my opinion. So there's some guys like that. Obviously, Ashton Jonty is having a phenomenal. His numbers are like, they don't even seem real.
No, they're video games.
It's video like
numbers.
Kid's played 5 games. 5 games. He has 95 carries, 1,031 yards. He's averaging 10.9 yards per carry. Just for context, the next closest guy is actually there's one guy ahead of him, Army should say. So non-option guy. There's not a lot of people near him. He's got 16 touchdowns. Next closest is 12. 1,031 yards. The next closest is 771. It's just ridiculous. And he's doing it every game. His lowest output of the season, Trevor, was against Portland State because he only had 11 carries, went for 127 yards. The only game he hasn't scored a touchdown. He went for 6 touchdowns, 267 yards on only 20 carries against Georgia Southern. He had 192 yards on 25 carries, 7.7 per carry for 3 touchdowns against Oregon. He had 259 yards on 26 carries and 4 touchdowns in a blowout win over Washington State. And this past weekend, he had 186 yards on only 13 carries for 3 touchdowns against Utah State. Like, his numbers are insane. Now, will a group of 5 kid have a chance to win the Heisman? That's the bigger question. But if we're talking about who's the most dominant player in college football right now, it's not even a debate, in my opinion. It's one of those 2 kids. It's Travis Hunter or this kid. There's no quarterback that belongs in this conversation right now. Not a one so far. And they are really good players. And I just don't know if they're going to have a legitimate shot. Now, what I do like is that the media is giving them a lot of attention, and they're not obsessing over quarterbacks, which is good for them because a lot of this is on perception and all that kind of stuff. But, if you talk about who are the 2 most dominant players in college football on offense, because this is an offense. Can we be honest? This is an offensive award, right? Primarily.
Yeah.
So, yeah. And I know people point to Cameron Ryan. Somebody, I don't think Cameron Ward belongs in this conversation. I don't. He's been a nice player and he's putting up some good numbers, but like you saw his flaws against Miami last week or against Cal last week. You saw his flaws. He brought him back. Well, he was part of the reason they were down by 25 to begin with. You know what I mean? So, and I'm not there with him right now. Part of that's my bias because I've never thought he was all that good. But here's the thing about Cameron Ward. Whatever I think about Cam Ward now, he's going to have some make or break games coming up that will either shut people like me up or prove people like me right. Because you talk about like Louisville next week, he's got that game. He's got Florida State, which is at least a spotlight game. You've got Georgia Tech. You're going to have Syracuse. Duke's got a pretty salty defense this year. And then, of course, he'll either get Clemson or somebody like that in the ACC. So he'll have his chance to kind of show it. I'm just not on board with like how great everybody says he's been. He's been good. But I'm not as high on him as some other people are. So like Virginia Tech, I put up this through 2 really bad picks that helped Virginia Tech be in that game, in my opinion. So we'll see if he can keep winning. But if he keeps winning and can cut down on some of those mistakes, then I think he could be in there. But right now, for me, there's not a quarterback in this conversation. It's a 2-man race for me right now. But again, we're 6 games through the season. Some people are only 5 games into the season. Like what happens the next 6 should have as much impact on what we see from the first 6. And that's where I'm coming from. You know what I mean? Like, but if we're voting right now, it's either it's a kid from Boise or the kid from Colorado. That's the only 2 people that I'm even thinking about, in my opinion. That's it.
I agree. Buy, sell, hold, Christopher Crosby. Ashton Genty has been the best player in college football up to this point of the season.
Yeah, I mean, buy it, but it's a hit, him or Travis Hunter. We already talked about that one, so we can go on to the next. But yeah, I think so. It's again, Travis Hunter's probably the best all-around player. He's the kid that's most dominant at his one position. It's hard to compare anybody else to Travis Hunter because he's doing it at 2 positions. You know what I mean? But as far as like best player at his one position, it's him. Best all-around player, it's Travis Hunter.
Christopher Crosby with another buy-sell hold. No Power 4 school will end the season without a loss through the conference championships.
Well, Trevor, I said that before the season, and I got after this past week, and I've got no reason to go away from that right now. You know, I mean, there's nothing. I mean, there's only one SEC team that's left that's undefeated. Only one. That's Texas. There's only 2 ACC teams that are undefeated, Pitt and Miami. The Big Ten has 3 undefeated, or has 5 undefeated teams still, right? Or is it 4? Hold on. 1, 2, 3, 4 undefeated teams still. And they all play each other, right? Indiana has to play Ohio State. Ohio State has to play Oregon. I think Penn State has to play Oregon as well. Penn State has to play Ohio State. So they can't all be undefeated. Only one can remain, and we'll see. I think Ohio State does have the best chance right now based on their schedule, and if they can win this weekend. So I think they will. I think Ohio State has the best chance. The Big 12 has 2 undefeated teams left, I believe. I know Iowa State and BYU are both undefeated. They have schedules that could allow them to go undefeated. They don't play each other. But like BYU still has to play Arizona, Oklahoma State, UCF, at Utah, Arizona State, and then a Big 12 title game. Iowa State has to play at West Virginia, at Kansas, at Utah, home against Kansas State, home against Texas Tech, home against UCF. I don't think either one of those teams finishes undefeated, Trevor. So, I mean, and then the other thing, too, is at the end of the day, you're going to need a team to be undefeated going into the conference championship games to have that. And I think a lot of these things, I don't even know that we're going to have all but maybe 1 or 2 teams undefeated even going into the conference championship games. And that's my prediction. I think everybody catches a loss. Ohio State's got the best chance not to catch a loss, in my opinion, if they win this weekend. But I think that's about one of the easiest predictions that I think I'm going to hold to right now is that one. And it's mainly because Bama and Georgia both caught loss. Here's the thing. A lot of the teams that have losses got losses to teams we did not expect them to lose to. Notre Dame losing to Northern Illinois. I mean, let's be real. If Notre Dame beat Northern Illinois, they already beat A&M on the road. They've already beat Louisville. Looking at the rest of their schedule, bro, they may run the table, right? But they've already lost a game. Bama's already lost to a team no one thought they were going to lose to. Georgia lost to Bama. That one we predicted. But it's like the first of their big games they lost and got dominated for a half. You know, I mean, there's a lot of losses from some of those teams that were like, you know, dude, they already lost to somebody I was surprised they lost to. And so I think that's kind of that, you know, Ole Miss losing at Kentucky, like didn't see that coming. So I think that's where I'm at, Trevor, of the fact that some of those teams are already losing to teams you don't expect. it's going to knock a lot of other people off, man. So I think this is going to be – I think everyone's going to catch a loss, and I think Ohio State's about the only team that right now I have any confidence in is going to actually run the table in the regular season if they win this weekend. Like Texas is really good, but I think their schedule is just more challenging than what Ohio State's is if Ohio State wins this week. I'm talking about like you know what I mean? Like the Oregon game's a big one. I don't want to discount that. I'm working with the assumption that for a conversation here that they win this weekend, and you look at what comes out of it. So if Texas wins this weekend, Trevor, they still have to play at Vanderbilt, which is looking a lot tougher, at Arkansas, we just saw Tennessee lose there, at Kentucky or at Texas A&M, and then they were going to have to play Georgia, Bama, Ole Miss, somebody else like that in the SEC title game. That's a lot tougher than if Ohio State wins this weekend. They have a game at Penn State. Other than that, they get Nebraska at home, Purdue at home, Indiana at home, Michigan home, and then their other road game is at Northwestern. So it's like, okay, if you can beat Penn State, a team that you've dominated for the last decade, even while you're getting beat by Michigan, you're still beating Penn State. You know what I mean? The last 3 years. I think they have the best shot, unless Penn State can finally figure out a way to beat the Buckeyes. What Franklin's done once, right? 2016. Isn't that the only year he's beat Ohio State? It's 2016.
Yes. Yeah. I agree though. With this one, I'm buying it. And honestly, looking at college football big picture and down the road, I think I'm just going to buy this year over year now, because with conference realignment and they're doing away with East and West, like you're not going to have teams like Georgia anymore who can just kind of escape by playing a bunch of teams in the SEC East. And with the teams added to the Big Ten and they're doing away with the East versus West, you're going to have teams. Now, I do think that Ohio State still has the most chances to go undefeated, to your point, but years down the road, Ohio State can't just get away with, well, as long as we beat Penn State and Michigan, 2 of our 12 regular season games, and then either go play Wisconsin or Purdue or Iowa, I guess. In
Northwestern one year, right? 2020,
right.
They beat Northwestern, right?
Right. I think it does away with that. So I don't think come playoff time, there's not going to be many undefeated teams.
And there's been several years that they would have beat Michigan and had to play Michigan in a rematch the next week because there's no longer the East-West too. So not only do you get like Oregon, okay, let's say you go on the road this weekend and you beat Oregon. There's a chance you're going to have to now beat them again on a neutral field later in the year. That's hard to do for anybody.
Yeah.
You know, and so that's going to make it tougher as well, Trevor, is like, you know, let's say Bama beats Georgia at home. Well, there's a chance you may have to beat them again.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think they will, but there's a chance, you know, and then Georgia, you know, same the other way around. So because there's no league champs or like divisions, I should say, to your point, not only can you not just beat up, you know, hey, you ran through your side and now you got to play some bum in the other division, or in Georgia's case, you do nothing but play bums and then you only have one tough game, which they lost last year, by the way, to Alabama. But now it's like, okay, you may have to play that team that you barely beat or that you beat at your place early in the season. You have to play them again. Right? I mean, look at 2011. LSU goes to Bama, beats Bama at Bama in 2011, and then they have to play them again in the national championship game. Right? Well, now that's being jumped up to the conference title games. And that's going to make it a little bit tougher for teams around the table. So I think that's a good point. Now, there's going to be some years where some teams get some really – because that's the thing. When you got like 18 teams in the league, there's going to be some years you get that quote-unquote random easy draw.
Right.
And it may not seem like an easy draw, but some teams are down. We had Florida State on our schedule, and we had, you know, Miami on our schedule, and we thought it was going to be a lot tougher schedule, but they're both down in a particular year. Or, you know, we thought we had this team and that team was going to be tough, but they're down. You know, I mean, it's like Notre Dame's 2021 schedule. That was a terrible schedule. It turned out to be so, but nobody thought that when it was put together initially, because you got to play at Florida State. You got to play Wisconsin on a neutral field. You got Cincinnati coming to your place. You got to play USC. You got to play North Carolina. You know, you got to play Stanford. 3-4 years before that season was played and the schedule was being put together, that's going to be a pretty tough schedule. And if Florida State sucked, and then Wisconsin was down, and Stanford was down, and USC was down, and, you know, and it's like they only had one good team, Cincinnati. So you just never really know how good a tough a schedule is going to be. And, I mean, who had Indiana is like, man, it's going to be a tough game for us. before the season started. It's looking like a lot tougher game now. So yeah, that stuff plays a role in it big time.
Christopher Crosby with another buy, sell, hold. Miami should be 4-2 right now.
I buy that. Normally, Trevor, I sell those type of comments. They got outplayed and they just no, they literally had game-changing plays in the final seconds that were reversed and should not have been reversed. That's different than like the touchdown. Maybe it was a touchdown, maybe it wasn't. I still don't feel conclusively that you could. And I said, whatever they called on the field, they should have. Even if you called it incomplete on the field, it should have stayed incomplete. If you called it a touchdown on the field, it should have stayed a touchdown. And same thing about that targeting penalty being taken off. That's literally because just so some of you understand, there's a lot of knucklehead Miami. Well, he wasn't defenseless. You guys know that's not the only prerequisite for targeting. It's defenseless or forcible contact on the head or neck area, right? It's not just head, but it's also about leading with the crown of your helmet. You can't launch. He led with the crown of his helmet, and he made forcible contact in the neck head area. What's the shoulder? Hey, Trevor, that's my shoulder, right?
Yeah.
What's it connected to? My neck. It's like, man, like that was a terrible call.
Yeah.
Terrible. And that you reversed it? No, that's my problem, Trevor. It was absolutely, and if you make that call correctly, game's over.
Yeah.
Miami can't stop the clock. Game's over. So yeah, they should absolutely be 4-2. And in the Virginia Tech game, before the touchdown call, or no touchdown call, that was blatant pass interference in the end zone. Blatant pass interference on the throw before that. That was not called. So, yeah, the ACC officiating, which we'll have a buy, so hold on that, is help. It's like you're playing your Miami at 16-11 right now at this point in time. So, yeah, they should be 4-2 right now.
Yep. Buy, sell, hold from Kish Squared. The AP poll got it right by ranking Georgia ahead of Alabama this week.
No, they did not get it right. Look, there's this mindset amongst way too many fans where you obsess over who you got beat by and ignore who you beat. How can you tell me that a week after Bama beat Georgia, had a 28-point lead on that team, that a week later, all of a sudden Georgia should be ranked higher? And my question is, based on what? They beat Clemson. Okay, it's a good win. They beat Clemson on neutral field. Bama beat Georgia. Like, their wins are better than Georgia's wins. They've looked better than Georgia in all but one game. Like, no, they should not be ranked high. Yes, that was a bad loss. Bad loss by Bama. But if you're going to compare their resumes, they still have a better resume than Georgia. Georgia did not look good at all this past weekend against a bad Auburn team. Georgia almost lost to Kentucky. Like, explain to me what you've seen from Georgia other than the G on their helmet that makes you think they should be a top 5 team. I haven't seen it yet. Oh, they're really talented. Okay, great. Florida State has talent. They're 1-5. Florida State's probably going to have more guys drafted than all but maybe one of the teams that's beat them so far. So, no, they should not be ranked ahead of Alabama. The AP got a lot of things wrong, like jumping Clemson over Notre Dame. Based on what? Oh, they have a better loss. Okay, but who have they beat? You know how many wins Clemson has over teams with a better than 500 record? 0. Their best win so far was over a 3-3 team. Yeah, but they won in okay, fine. Like I don't know what to tell you. Notre Dame went and beat the number 15 team in the country on the road by 10, but sure, they got a worse loss than Clemson. Like who you lose to is part of your resume. It's not the defining character of your resume. The defining character of your resume should be who you beat. And there's way too many people ignoring that so they can focus on who a team lost to. Like, what makes you think Bama's better than Georgia? I don't know. I watched them play each other the week before. This isn't like Bama beat Georgia in September, and we're talking about what happened in November. We're talking about a week ago, Trevor. A week and a half ago, we watched
Right.
Bama beat Georgia, and at one point in time, they had a 4-touchdown lead.
So I do actually have a question for you, because this is interesting, because I agree with everything that you said. I do. But from a voting standpoint, because I just went and I pulled up the AP poll from the week where Alabama lost. Like, they were still undefeated, and it goes Alabama 1, Texas 2, Ohio State 3, Tennessee 4, Georgia 5.
Mm-hmm.
So how would you rank it? Because Alabama had the better win, and a loss is a part of your resume. So if Alabama loses to an unranked 2-2 Vandy team, do you just drop them from 1 to 4?
Well, first of all, I wouldn't have had Georgia that high going into the week. This is like so much of the rankings right now. So here's the thing. Why is BYU not ranked higher?
I mean, I don't know. I mean, I think it's because their name is BYU. It's because
and they started the season unranked, right?
Sure.
I mean, BYU's 5-0 right now. They beat SMU on the road. They beat Kansas State, who's ranked by 29 points. And they beat Baylor on the road. So who's got a more impressive resume right now? Them or Iowa State or Georgia or Bama? You get what I'm saying? Like, this is all built on who you thought teams were coming into the season. And that's the reason I like the way the committee does it, which is each week it's a re-looking at your entire resume. And what I don't like about the AP poll and the coaches poll, it's reactionary to what you just saw. And so if I'm gonna be emotional about my ranking, then I might put Bama behind them. It's like somebody said, well, Tennessee lost to Arkansas, they dropped X number of spots. Bama lost, they only dropped X, so it's biased. I'm like, no, Tennessee's resume isn't as good. What's the big win for Tennessee? A road win over a barely top 20 Oklahoma team compared to Bama beating what y'all perceive to be a top 5 Georgia team? No, yeah, they both lost to unranked teams. The overall resume for Bama's better. Now, Bama, the way Bama's played defense the last 5-6 quarters, it won't matter at the end of the day because they're going to catch another one if they don't improve their defense and their emotional, how they're handling things. But you look at these teams, Trevor, and you say, you guys are all still ranking based on your preconceived notion of who was what, when, and where. Like, I believe, like, if I look at the AP top 25, and you're going to say BYU right now is ranked 14th. I'll make this case. Why is LSU ranked ahead of them? Why is Notre Dame ranked ahead of them? Why is Clemson ranked ahead of them? Why is Ole Miss ranked ahead of them? Why is Tennessee ranked ahead of them? None of those teams have a 2-win resume right now, where teams are ranked right now, like BYU does, who's undefeated. They don't have a bad loss they have to explain away. They have a road win over SMU, who currently is undefeated, blew out TCU, blew out Florida State, and went on the road and outplayed Louisville for 4 quarters. Louisville kept making it close, but SMU was the better team in that game. But they're ranked in the 14th. Why? Because preseason you didn't think they were that good. So we got to stop with this feelings of, I thought this team was this, and so I'm always going to give them benefit of the doubt, and go off what's their resume tell you today. And so when I look at a ranking, it's not, well, what happened this weekend? It's how did what happened this weekend impact the team's overall resume? And that's how I look at it when I'm doing a ranking. So I would still have Bama higher. I would probably have it, and this is, Trevor, you and I were kind of talking about this. I'd probably have it a lot different than other people would have it, because I wouldn't have Georgia, Bama, Tennessee, teams and Ole Miss as high as other people have them. Because it's like, well, what about what you've done makes me think that you should be a top 5 team, other than my perception of who you are as a team? You haven't shown me that on the field yet, but I'd still have Bama higher than all those other teams. Why? Because Bama's got the absolute best win of that group. And I care a lot about who you beat than who you lost to, outside of the number of losses that you have. And so I would not have Georgia as a top 5 team right now. So now, do I think BYU is going to stay that way? No, I don't. I think they're going to lose some games, but you can't take, because because I think they're going to lose games, I also can't punish them for what they've done so far. And the ranking should be a reflection of who you are today. And who you are today, BYU, not many teams have a better 1-2 punch of wins than what BYU has right now. If you look at rankings, right, what the rankings say, that to me is accurate. So that's where I'm at. So no, I would still have. Did I answer your question, Trevor?
Yeah, for the most part. I mean, I think it's tough to gauge. Like, you answered it because you said initially you would not have Georgia ranked as high, so
Correct.
you could still drop Alabama a number of spots.
Right. But just because you like, and I'm also not someone who always drops a team when they lose. If your resume still says you're here, then I keep you there. Right? Just because you lost and now you're a one-loss team and the team behind you has a one loss also, that doesn't mean that team should leap you because your loss was more recent or quote-unquote worse. Depends on how bad the loss was. Like, if Vandy would have beat them like 40-14, maybe I'd have a different conversation because then I'd be less impressed with how they're playing. You see what I'm saying? But like, that's the emotional, or not the most, that's the recency bias thing that I think should be removed from voting. Is just because I got my loss more recently than you did, by a week in this case, doesn't mean that all of a sudden I'm better than you. Because I literally just watched you play a week ago and you were not better than them. And I look at the overall resume and you're not better than them. Right? So like, let's say this. Let's say this weekend, you look at the rankings, Trevor. Let's say Ohio State goes on the road. And let's say Penn State loses, just to get them out of the conversation. Let's say Oregon beats Ohio State by a field goal. You know it's probably going to happen, right? Penn State loses, so they go down. Georgia is off. Or no, they play Mississippi State, so they're basically off because an inter-squad scrimmage would be more competitive than playing Mississippi State.
Yeah.
Ohio State loses to Oregon. And what's going to happen? They're going to leap Georgia ahead of Ohio State. But does Ohio State losing this weekend mean that all of a sudden Georgia's a better team or has a better resume than Ohio State? No, it doesn't.
Sure.
What I would simply do is flip Oregon and Ohio State. That's all I would do. Unless, like, it's a blowout, right? I mean, that's always like, but I expect it to be, if Ohio State loses, it'll be a close loss. So does that mean all of a sudden Ohio State should fall behind Bama and Georgia and those teams because their loss is most recent? Or do I say, okay, based on their entire resume, that's still a really good football team.
Sure.
That is still better than all those other teams with an identical record. Just because they lost most recently doesn't mean that all of a sudden they're not still a top 3 team. That's the way I look at it. Ready for the next one?
Yep. Buy, sell, hold. Alabama will lose at least 2 more games this year.
So Bama's got a relatively tough schedule remaining. And you've got at Tennessee. That's a very losable game. At LSU, very losable game. And at Oklahoma, very losable game. If their defense plays the way it does now. Oklahoma would be the least of those likely options. And then maybe potentially you've got a home game against Missouri, a home game against Auburn, and you never know with rivalry games. I mean, I think they should kill Auburn. But if we're talking regular season, like for the purpose of this question, I'm going to say regular season because I could see Bama losing one more game and then getting the SEC title game and losing losing to Texas or Georgia in a rematch or something like that. Regular season, they could. They got to get their defense fixed. If they don't get their defense fixed, then this is a bye because there's some teams that will outscore them. I mean, guys, Vanderbilt's a great game. Vanderbilt played their butts off. This is the same team that lost to Georgia State. You know what I mean? Like, they were better than Bama on Saturday. They're not all of a sudden a great team. They're a much improved team. I mean, they legit beat Virginia Tech. I actually think in a lot of ways they outplayed Missouri, but they couldn't get it done. This is an improved football team. It's not one that should beat Bama. They did because Bama has some maturity issues that I've seen from what I saw Saturday and what's come out of it, and their defense is a mess. Because every time Vanderbilt needed to score, they went right down the field and scored on them. Yep. And even when Bama was like, okay, Georgia's coming back, let's make some stops. If Georgia would have had another minute on the clock and they didn't have to rush a couple of those end zone throws, I don't know that Bama beats them, to be honest with you. So both of those teams actually need to fix their defense in a big way, or they're both going to catch a couple more losses. I mean, that's a real possibility too. Trevor, is that Georgia and Bama have some major things they need to fix on their defenses and along their lines, or they're both going to lose a couple more games. Georgia more so because they play a much tougher schedule than Bama, but Bama because there's some teams that can – because it's about matchups, Trevor. LSU's not a very good football team, in my opinion. They're solid. They're a top 25 team, but they're a bad matchup for Bama if their defense doesn't figure themselves out, because they could maybe get into a shootout, and if we got the ball last, we might be able to go down and beat you.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So, same thing with Tennessee. Like right now, I would pick Tennessee to win that game. At Tennessee, I'd pick Tennessee to beat Alabama right now. Right now. Too. Until I see Bama get that fixed. Because I think Tennessee can stop Alabama's offense to a degree. They can slow it down. Think about Arkansas. Arkansas's got a pretty salty defense this year. I mean, they had some just blown plays against Oklahoma State that let Oklahoma State get some points, but like they've been pretty salty the last. I mean, they beat Auburn, held them to 14 points. That's basically what Georgia did. They lost to A&M, only gave up 21 points. Their defense played pretty good, and they were pretty darn good there. I mean, they got a pretty good defense. Bama does not right now. They don't. I mean, Wisconsin moved the ball decently on them early. South Florida moved the ball decently on them early. They could just out-talent those teams. They couldn't out-talent Vanderbilt the way that they could those teams. So, yeah, a lot of those teams are in trouble if they don't get things fixed. But that's true for Notre Dame and a lot of teams. If you don't get your pass game fixed, you're going to be – a lot of teams are still figuring some stuff out. That's why I say Notre Dame fans, like, hey, maybe let's not panic yet about Notre Dame, because there's a lot of teams with flaws right now. Notre Dame's not the only flawed team in the country right now. I'd say outside of Texas and Ohio State, who I haven't seen a ton of flaws from so far, but they haven't been pushed and challenged a whole lot. There's a lot of teams with things that, well, you better get that fixed or you're going to be in trouble. Notre Dame's not alone in that conversation.
100%.
They just have the worst loss, I would say, of all. I mean, I've seen Notre Dame fans try to justify talking trash to Bama, like, man, Vandy might as well be a MAC. Guys, no. If Vanderbilt played in the MAC, they would be one of the 3 or 4 best teams in the MAC most years, even as bad as they are.
Agreed.
And this is an improved Vanderbilt. It's not a good, they're not going to go win 9 games this year, but this is an improved Vanderbilt team. They had some good portal additions. I mean, they're better than I thought they were going to be. That's still not as bad as losing to Northern Illinois. Don't try to, and you lost at home. At least Bama's game was on the road, so don't try to justify that. But I also would say Notre Dame has better wins than a lot of teams as well.
Buy, sell, hold from Ball Peen Shillelagh. Reflecting on all of the upsets this past weekend, this season, we get our first 2-loss national champion in the playoff era.
Oh, I would have said that's possible even before this weekend's upsets, Trevor, so I'll buy that. Just because you're going to have way more of those on the table. I mean, the reason you didn't see it a lot in the playoff era is because you only had 4 teams get in, and there are some pretty darn good 2-loss teams that got left out in certain years that are in now. Or like USC in 2016 with 3 losses would have been really dangerous in the postseason of a 12-team playoff that year. So, I'll buy that. I'm not predicting it because I still think, Ohio State, Texas are really good football teams. But as of right now, that's very possible. Very possible. What are your thoughts? You think?
Yeah, it's interesting. I'm gonna hold on this one. I think there's going to be multiple 2-loss teams in the playoff, just because that's what the landscape of college football tells us. A national champion 2-loss, maybe. I think it would have to be something to where it's a 1 loss in the regular season, and then a team drops a game in their conference title, sort of. But I don't know. So
because the interesting thing, Trevor, is a 2-loss team is likely playing a 1 or 2 seed in the quarters.
Yeah.
And so that's where the path could open up, So let's say Georgia loses 2 games. They're a 7 seed. That's a team that you don't necessarily want to play if you're the 2 seed in the quarterfinals. You know what I mean? So that's where I'm like, it'll be a team like that, in my opinion, that could make that type of run. So it's going to be interesting.
Buy, sell, hold from Miller HC56. Nil and the portal has changed college football so much that people need to change their expectations of what a great or playoff caliber team looks like moving forward.
Oh, I mean, I'm going to sell that to a degree. I think if you're Miller, I think where this is a really good observation is if you're talking about record. Because I think it's not just NIL and it's not just the portal. It's also to the point Trevor made earlier, is it's harder to avoid playing a good schedule now than it was before. When if you were in the SEC East in the time when the SEC East was down, you were going to be in a better position to run the table and have, you were going to look great doing it. As I said, last year, Georgia is not an undefeated team going into the playoff or in the SEC title game if they played a legitimate schedule. Georgia was a flawed team. And I tried to tell everybody that all year. No. They're going to kill Bama. Bama doesn't have it. And then look what happened. They got pushed around. I'm like, they were not that great of a team. They were a very good team, but they weren't this elite. Oh my God, if they would have got in the playoff, they'd have killed Michigan. And they like this fantasy that we've built in our heads about Georgia. Those had one bad game against Alabama. Okay. I think they would have had a tough time against Georgia because they were not a real physical football team. Bama was. Michigan was. So it looked better. But I think record-wise, I think a great and playoff caliber team is still going to look the same, in my opinion, Trevor. It just may not come with the same record. You know what I mean? Like, because you could say, well, NIL and the portal helps Vanderbilt get that's true, but it also helps these really good teams fill holes a little easier. So you lose your quarterback a little earlier than expected. I can go get one now if I hadn't recruited one or my guy's not ready. I can go get one and be a better team. But Sam Hartman was a disappointment last year. Maybe. But I'll tell you what, Notre Dame's not a 9-3 regular season team if he's not their starting quarterback last year. I don't think they are. I think they're 8-4 at best if Sam Hartman's on the team last year. Because they're and they couldn't get Javonte Jean-Baptiste. Mm-hmm. And they couldn't get Thomas Harper. Because there were some holes on that roster that Marcus Freeman inherited that he had to fix through the portal. And, now you hope that you're in a position where you don't have to do that as much moving forward. But it helps both sides. I think what it's going to do is, to his point, Trevor, you're going to see more Vanderbilts pulling off upsets of Bama.
Sure.
You're going to see more of that. But the look of the championship teams is still going to be very similar. I just don't think right now Bama looks like a great team because I don't think they are a great team right now. I don't know that there's any great teams right now. But that was true at times before then. 2021 was a year where I felt like Georgia was really good. They were great. But after them, I don't know that there was any other great teams in college football. There's been other years. 2017, I didn't think there was any great teams in college football in 2017. Georgia wasn't a great team. Bama, who won it, wasn't a great team. Clemson with Kelly Bryant wasn't a great. There were no great teams that year. That's always been true. And then there's other years where there's like 3 great teams. Like that 2018 Oklahoma team that was the 3rd best team in college football in the playoff that year. Notre Dame, that 2018 Notre Dame team that was the 4th best team that year, would have smacked a lot of teams in the year before.
Yeah.
Like you put 18 Notre Dame, and because 18 Notre Dame would have smacked 17 Notre Dame, who almost beat Georgia, who played for the title, went to overtime. It's a much better version of Notre Dame. That Oklahoma team in 18 would have done some damage in 2017, boy. But that's the breaks. That happens sometimes. You know what I mean? The 18 version of Bama was a whole lot better than the 17 version of Bama that won a title, in my opinion. So that's always been true. I just think what it's going to change is the records are going to look different. But I think a great team is still going to look like a great team. Even if they have a loss, maybe even 2, they're going to look like a great team. I don't know if that answers the question, but I think this is a really interesting submission. I think it'll change records. I don't know that it'll change the look of what a great team is.
Yeah.
Can I say your point earlier, Trevor, about we're going to see less undefeateds is the biggest thing that we're going to see now out of all this stuff. But it still doesn't change what a great team looks like, because team champions with losses is not all that uncommon throughout the history of football. And Nick Saban won 7 national titles? Only had 2 undefeated teams. 5 of his national champions, including his LSU team, lost a game.
Yeah. I just don't think, and this is more in regards to the playoff caliber, but Brian, you hit it, and I said it earlier, I think people fall under the assumption that if you're undefeated, you're just a great football team. Maybe. Yeah, there's truth to that because going undefeated is really hard. Based on, I don't know if it's as much nil and the transfer portal as it is like conference realignment. That's going to lead to more less undefeated teams. But for playoff caliber teams, I get where this question's coming from. I don't know if anybody goes within 7 days of watching what Alabama did to Georgia and how dominant they were before that to seeing a loss to Vandy, and they're just like, well, they're just not a playoff caliber team anymore. I just don't think it's that way. I'm going to sell this just based on the wording of the question of what the team looks like. Because, Brian, to your point, you can watch a team and say that this is a playoff caliber team. I mean, you can go look at the transfer portal additions that Ohio State made this past offseason, and you can look and say, yo, this is still a playoff caliber team. You add Quinshon Judkins. Will Howard's been playing better than what I thought that he was going to. Caleb Downs is a good addition to that defense. So, like,
that was unfair. Like, that's already a great defense, and now you're giving him Caleb Downs. Come on.
Right.
That's not fair.
So, I think that it can benefit on both sides. But, Miller, I definitely understand where this question is coming from because I think what nil in the transfer portal does is it levels the playing field and it raises the floor. But it still also provides elite teams an opportunity to raise their ceiling, for sure. For sure. Miller with another buy-sell hold. I feel like I've seen a lot of exciting football, but not a lot of great football being played on Saturdays.
Buy the heck out of that.
Mm-hmm.
Fun football doesn't equal great football. There's been a lot of fun football, a lot of good football, not a lot of great football. Because I still don't know that there's any great teams. When I think great, like, okay, can anybody in this year beat 21 Georgia? Can anybody this year beat 20 Bama, 19 LSU, 18 Clemson? No, I don't think any of them can beat those teams. Can any of these teams, you know what I mean? Like, that's great to me. There's a lot of really good teams, potentially great if they can continue improving in some areas. But no, I don't know that I've seen it. And like Texas, it's hard to evaluate Texas because we've seen them play half their games this year without their starting quarterback. Like they haven't really been tested by anybody that good. Michigan's okay, Michigan's closer to being 2-3 than they are 3-2, or 3-3 than they are 4-2, in my opinion. So I agree with that. And that's also a reality of the portal, is because you're going to have a lot more teams that are kind of all new together. You're not going to have as many. We've been here together for X amount of time, and that it's like Ohio State getting used to a lot of new transfers, Texas getting used to a lot of new transfers, Notre Dame getting used to not a lot of new transfers, Bama's getting used to a lot of new transfers. And you never know which way it's going to go. Some of these teams are going to get better. Some of the teams might take a dip because some of these transfers may not be bought in once you lose a game or two. Some of them may, hey, look, I came here to win a championship, and so let's keep it rolling. It's going to make for a lot of that, Trevor. Teams that we think look good early are just, and some teams that maybe don't like the one far early are going to take off once it all comes together. That's something I think we're going to see, where who we think is great in September may not be who we think is great in November. A lot more of those contrasts than maybe we've seen in the past. When in the past, like the best teams in the country, you kind of knew early. Like, yep, that team's really good. I think we're going to see a little bit more of that. That's a really good submission.
Yep, I agree with that 100%. Buy, sell, hold from Tyler Benj. College football should have a ranking system that has clear and transparent rules with a mix of AI-generated system with a committee of members with no affiliation to media, networks, or conferences, and scrape the AP and the coaches poll.
No, I'm because like this. I'm not making AI a primary driver of what we're doing with this. No, look, the AP and the coaches polls to me serve their purpose. They are fun discussion points. They are things that allow you as a media entity to give some kind of context, whatever that may be, to what you're watching this weekend. Hey, we're watching number 15 versus number 16, as opposed to just Notre Dame versus Louisville. They are no longer determinative of who plays for the national championship. I mean, look, the playoff committee has shown a lot in recent years that they don't really care what the pollsters say. Remember how everybody freaked out about BYU a few years ago? Was it 2020? BYU was blowing out a bunch of nobodies.
Yeah.
And the first playoff committee came out and they were like nowhere close to the top 10, and ESPN flipped out, social media flipped out. And they were like, well, who'd they beat? They haven't beat anybody. And then they finally played a good team in Coastal. I think it was Coastal, right? And they got beat because they weren't that good of a team. And then plus AI stuff is always going to overhype. Like AI is going to probably overhype certain leagues. And we see this, all the computer simulations, they always overhype certain, the SEC always gets overhyped in any kind of computer simulation because it's got to come from somewhere. It's got to be, the thing's got to be created from someone. It's still a human flaw, in my opinion. So no, I don't want to see an AI generated system. Now the committee members with no affiliation to the media networks or conferences. So basically you want people that have no affiliation to football whatsoever. Like anyone that is involved in athletics or football in any way is going to have some sort of affiliation. Find yourself people that you believe are willing to be honest about what they're saying and go there. Because like the thing is, Trevor, the more you start tying, money to, you get in, your conference gets that amount, you get more teams in, you get even more. Now you start creating opportunities for people to kind of have some, this may mean a lot for my league. That concerns me. But it's going to be hard for you to find people that have, affiliation with no media networks or conferences. Who does that leave? Who does that leave? So you can't have attended college at any Power 5 school. There's a lot of other things that you kind of have to go through. And it's like, we can say that this system is flawed without saying that's the answer. But I'm fine with the AP and coaches poll. It gives us something to talk about every week. Neither are decisive when it comes to who's going to play for championship. And that's all I care about.
Yeah, I agree. And relying on AI generated things as well is just, I think it takes out a factor of like what goes into the voting and some of the eye test. I don't know if AI is going to be able to do that. I think it would look at it from a very calculated standpoint of wins, losses, rankings, whatever. And plus, to your point, if there's no affiliation to the media networks or conferences, that starts to leave a very minute pool of people who can be a part of those polls to vote,
who may not have the expertise to make good decisions.
Right. So I'm going to sell that one as well.
And Trevor, I know you got to run because you got to be on the next show. So I'm going to keep rocking and rolling and get through as many of these as I can. So thank you for joining me today. I'll be back with you here very, 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 very soon.
Sounds good.
Yeah. All right. That was an interesting submission, Tyler, and I do appreciate you bringing that up. But I'm not an AI guy on that one. Tyler also says college football needs to get rid of BISA hold. College football needs to get rid of conference referees and go to the national system with national referees that will call game regardless of conference. Again, I don't know that this fixes the problem. I know that we've identified the problem. Officiating sucks. I don't know that a lot of people are talking about the proper way to fix it. And I don't think that going to a national system instead of a conference really fixes it. It's not going to make people less biased. It's not, who that now all of a sudden, okay, so instead of conferences doing things to get certain teams, now it's going to be what? The national people saying, well, we don't want this really good team to get knocked off because we want this really big market in the playoff. And so if you think it's because it's rigged, it's still going to have that element to it if you think that's the case. And if anything, you ensure that every group of officiating has a chance to be mediocre. I think for me, it's, look, set a standard for conferences to set a standard that conferences have to meet, right? Like, look, this is the minimum standard. And if your officials aren't evaluated by a certain standard that we hold, then there's going to be constant, you don't get postseason games, whatever. That's fine. But it's easier to evaluate this and monitor this and improve this when it's a smaller set of officials by one entity dealing with a smaller group as opposed to one entity dealing with all of them. And that's really what it comes down to. The problem isn't that conferences do it compared to the NCAA or whoever else, the CFB power people, whatever. It still comes down to they don't invest enough in officiating. They don't invest enough in training. They don't invest enough into, making it to where it's something that's attractive for people who might be better at it. There's a lot of different things that go into this that say the system is broken because they're not treating a very important part of the game with the necessary respect needed to make sure that that part of the game is really good. And look, it's not like I don't know about the NFL because I don't pay attention to the NFL, but I do know that I hear a lot of people complaining about officiating in the NFL, and that's one entity controlling a much smaller number of officials. I remember growing up as a kid watching baseball, and as I got older and I played baseball, I remember thinking, like, when I stopped watching baseball a few years ago, thinking, God, umpiring is getting terrible. And so that again, small entity with one entity with a smaller number of schools. It doesn't exactly change anything. And so I don't know if that fixes the problem. The problem is these conferences need to start taking this more seriously and investing more resources into making sure that these officials are properly trained and held accountable. That's the fact. I mean, they need to be able to be held more accountable for not doing their job. And then it's up to you to make sure you're investing into this enough for proper training, proper, staff, like each umpiring crew being put together well, that they work well together, that who your best crews are, and make sure that those best crews are assigned to the most important games and things like that. Those things are all factors that need to be controlled by the conferences. And until they do that, it doesn't matter who controls it. It's about because the college football playoff committee, let's say they're the ones in charge of officiating, whatever, NCAA, however you want to do it. They're now going to have to oversee how many crews, and you think that that's going to make for the attention to detail and the training better? No, that's not going to fix the problem at all. All right, JP is for Notre Dame. Buy, sell, hold, the most dangerous games in October for Notre Dame. In order of most difficult: Navy, Georgia Tech, and Stanford. Let me think about this one. I'm going to sell that. I'm going to say Georgia Tech, Navy, Stanford. You're close, JP. I'm just going to flip it. I still think Georgia Tech is slightly more dangerous for me than Navy. I know that Navy has the triple and they're running it really well. I think Georgia Tech has better talent. And I think Georgia Tech has a defense that concerns me a little bit more than Navy's does right now. But it's close, but I'll go Georgia Tech, Navy, and Stanford. That would be mine. So I'm going to sell it, but you're really close. Buy, sell, hold. Notre Dame will flip a quarterback that is committed to a Power 4 college football program. Buy. Definitely buy. Yes, I'll just leave it at that, but that's a definite buy. Fish ND. Buy, sell, hold. Kenny Minchie or CJ Carr will get meaningful game reps in 2024 in an effort to prepare them for 2025. I wish I could buy that. I really do. I wish that is something that I felt confident that Notre Dame was going to do, but I don't. I'm selling it. I'm not selling it out of I'm not happy about selling it. But it's just kind of how I see it, to be honest with you. So I'm going to sell that one. Aiden Benami, buy, sell, hold. Ali Gordon is still a top running back. Well, I mean, he hasn't looked like it so far. I don't know that that's necessarily all his fault, but no, he has not looked good. So right now, is he a top running back talent-wise? Sure. Is he a top running back with how he's playing? No, I mean, he's not. He's very clearly not. Buy, sell, hold. Tyson Ford is Notre Dame type talent. I mean, buy. Talent was never Tyson Ford's issue. It's never an issue. And just for the record, Tyson was not on the team this year. So when he jumped in the portal, he did not leave the team. He was no longer on a football scholarship. Buy, sell, hold. Georgia has more players out for suspension than Notre Dame has injuries. I wish I could buy that. It's not quite there, but it's close. It's close, but Notre Dame's injuries are still more. But that's just because Notre Dame has a lot of injuries. Georgia has more guys out on suspension than there are other teams that have less injuries than Georgia has guys suspended for that. There's no doubt. JG Y-Town, buy, sell, hold. Mike Denbrock, Riley Leonard will open up the offense passing. Buy, definite buy. I think we're going to see this. Again, it's just my projection. I don't have any intel. I think we're going to see the offensive the pass game start looking a lot different and a lot better. Bison Hold, Notre Dame will average 40 points for the rest of the season. No, I'm going to sell that. I mean, that's a big jump. If you take Purdue out, I mean, they've only scored over 30 points twice in 5 games. So no, I'm going to sell that. But I think they'll be close to 40, but I need to see it first. Like, I need to see it first before I'm ready to go there. It's possible. Bison Hold, the defense will play better with the younger players getting more time. No, the defense will play better if the veterans start playing better. I don't know that we can expect a lot more from the younger players than what they've already done. They've carried the defense for the most part outside of Xavier Watts, really, and Jordan Clark for the first 5 games. If this defense is going to play better, it's going to be because of the veterans playing better, and because they have not been so far. We are Notre Dame. Bison Hold, now 6 weeks into the season. Does the ACC and Big 12 get 2 teams in the playoffs? I think the ACC has a much better shot than the Big 12. I think the Big 12 is still going to eat itself. I do. I don't think that the Big 12 is going to get 2 in. I think that's still at 1. I think the ACC has a much better chance because you've got Miami, who doesn't play Clemson until potentially the ACC title game. I could see a scenario where both Miami and Clemson win out, or maybe Miami loses a game, wins out after that. Clemson wins out, doesn't lose till Miami, and then they both get in. I could see several scenarios where 2 ACC teams get in. That number is getting smaller because, Louisville's now got 2 losses. They're out. Florida State's out. SMU's a legit contender first spot. If they can run, they got to run the table in the regular season. They got a shot. Pitt's still undefeated, but the list is getting a lot smaller. But they still have a shot for 2, no question. Bison Hold, SMU will be in the ACC championship game this year or will be a playoff team within 2 years this year, including. I'm going to sell that. I don't think they'll be in the ACC title game this year, and I don't think they'll be in the playoff, but they're going to be a very dangerous team. I just don't know if they have it enough to do it for 12 full games, but they proved me wrong last week and got a win over Louisville. So I don't want to necessarily bet against them, but I still think they are not quite there yet where a full season is going to get them into that point. D. Troll Hunter, Bison Hold, Texas drops back-to-back games starting with Oklahoma. Why would you do that to Texas? Because every time you do one of these things and I sell it, and it ends up coming true, like Vanderbilt beating Bama and Florida State going 0-2. I'm going to sell that. I don't think they're going to lose to Oklahoma. I just don't. I will say this, D-Troll Hunter. What they do against Oklahoma, they will also do against Georgia. So if they lose to Oklahoma, I think they lose to Georgia. If they beat Oklahoma, I think they beat Georgia. I just think that momentum, that confidence is going to either be there or it won't be based on how they play against Georgia. So that's where I would be with that one. Bison Hold, USC gets right and beats Penn State. I guess I kind of got to give away one of my predictions for tomorrow. I do have USC beating Penn State this weekend. That is a prediction that I'm making this weekend. Bison Hold, Iowa State is appropriately ranked. They're close, but no, they're not appropriately ranked. I think Iowa State should be a little bit lower, if I'm being completely honest with you. Their best win so far is over Iowa. I mean, actually, you could maybe even, Iowa. Their second best win, you could argue, is over North Dakota. I'm not sure how North Dakota is this year. Let me go look up their schedule. But there's a lot of past years, North Dakota's been a pretty good football team. They have some national championships at the FCS level, too. You could argue that that's their second best win. They're 4-2. And their only other loss was to number 2 North Dakota State. So, yeah, you could argue that they beat number 4 Montana. You could argue that their second best win is over an FCS team. And so, no, they beat Baylor, who's not good. They beat Houston, who's not good. Arkansas State, who's not good. They had a nice comeback win over Iowa on the road. That's a good win. I think right now BYU is should be without question the highest ranked Big 12 team. Without question. They've beat 2 ranked opponents already. How is Iowa State ranked ahead of BYU? Somebody explain that to me. Somebody give me a reason why you have 2 5-0 teams from one conference. One of them has no wins over ranked teams and only 1 win over a team that was ranked when they played. And the other team has wins over 2 teams that are currently ranked in the top 25, and that team is 4 spots lower than the other. It makes no sense to me. They absolutely do not belong in the top in that high. They are a top 15 to 18 team, but they should not be creeping up on the top 10. No. Detroit Hunter, the Ole Miss defense is more legit than the offense. I buy that. I mean, even the game they lost, the defense played well. I thought the offense cost them that game. No question. No question. Buy, sell, hold. Alabama's defense is allowing scoring on 81% of their red zone trips, but the rest of their team stats are good, not great outside of pass breakups. This is an indication of a scheme issue more than a talent issue. I think it's a little bit of both. I think Alabama has some talent issues compared to where they've been in the past. I think the thing that you're missing from this is it's not just scheme, it's not just talent, it's also buy-in. And you can tell the level of buy-in by how a team responds when things aren't going well. And you started to see that late in the Georgia game where things just weren't going well. And nobody from Bama stepped up and made a play. Nobody showed that kind of fire. The only fire we've seen from Bama on defense the last 2 weeks was one of their veterans, and I believe a captain, having an emotional meltdown at the end of that game. And I don't see that. I think their attitude is just as much of an issue as any scheme or talent issues. And I think all three of those things are why they're struggling a little bit on defense right now. Detroit Hunter, Clark Lee will be the coach at Vanderbilt in 2025. Bye. He's not going anywhere. First of all, they're going to lose several games moving forward, and he's not leaving. I don't think he's leaving Vanderbilt on his own accord. I don't see that. That would shock me, very much shock me. And buy, sell, hold. Sonny Dykes, the head coach at TCU, is on the hot seat. I mean, that's a buy. I mean, right now, the way that they're playing this season, the championship game run was a fluke. I mean, they're 3-3 right now. They just lost to Houston at home. To put that into context, I mean, yeah, they got beat by UCF at home. That was a bad loss. They got beat by SMU on the road. That's actually not a bad loss. Houston was 1-4 coming into that game, had not scored a touchdown in the two previous games combined. Got beat by Cincinnati 34-0. Got beat by Iowa State 20-0. And they beat TCU 30-19. That's a bad loss. Last year they were 4-8. They had the title game run in 22. The year before that, in 2022, they were 8-5 after their title game run. Oh, I'm sorry. That's Houston. Let me go to TCU. Give me a second. Last year, TCU was 5-7. Then they had the title game run in 22. In 21, they were 5-7. He's probably, the way things are going right now, they got to play at Utah next weekend. They're off this weekend. Then they still got to play Texas Tech, who's scrappy, at Baylor, Oklahoma State at home, Arizona at home, at Cincinnati. If they don't fix things in a big way, they're going to have a losing record. So in 4 years, he'll have 3 losing records. Yeah, that to me puts him on the hot seat. Absolutely puts him on the hot seat. And he's in year 4, by the way, Brandon. He's in year 4. And if they have a losing record this year, he will have 3 years of a losing record in 4 seasons. Correct? Because hold on. Let me just go look real quick, because I believe the year he went to the title game was his second year at TCU, but I could be wrong. Let me just check that real quick. Let me see here. No, he's only in year 3, Brandon, so you're correct. So year 3, they went 5-7 the year before, but he wasn't the coach. So title game in year 1 with somebody else's players, and then they've gotten progressively worse. So I think he's on the hot seat. I mean, look, we saw Gene Chizik win a title and get fired, a year or 2 later? So I do think he's on the hot seat. So you are correct. This is only year 3, Brandon, but to me, he's on the hot seat. You can't lose to the teams they're losing to the way they're losing and still be selling something you did 2 years ago. I'll tell you like this. If Marcus Freeman in 2012 would have led Notre Dame to the national title game and lost 65-7, went 5-7 last year, and be 3-3 against the schedule TCU is playing, I doubt any of you would think he's anything but on the hot seat. And he should be. And same for Sonny Dykes. Detroit Hunter, the committee should view Miami as a 2-loss team since the officials made 2 wrong calls in back-to-back weeks to save their season. I would say more so 5-1. I absolutely think they blew the call. I think they should be 4-2 right now. I think the call against Virginia Tech was more, as I said very clearly, whatever they called on the field, they should have stuck with, because I don't think it was clear either way. If you're being honest, I don't think it was clear either way. That's more debatable. The other game was a flat out, you blew the call, you blew the review. It was just awful. So I'd say 5-1. They should be 4-2, but 5-1 is where I'd say. So I would treat them that way. And part two, the ACC officials are the worst in the country. I buy that. They're really bad and have been for years. Lucky Duck 512. If Oregon can stop Ohio State's run game, they win by more than 7 points. If they can't stop the run, they lose by more than 14 points. I'm going to sell that. If they stop the run game, they can still only win by 3. And if they stop the run game, they could still lose. I mean, look, I'm not a big Will Howard fan at all. But they still have an incredibly talented receiving core. And they still have a great defense. And I could see Ohio State struggling to score on offense and still winning the game. Because if they can't run, I mean, Ohio State has given up 34 points all season. And, you know, they've played 2 Big Ten teams and only given up 14 points. So that's a great defense. So, no, I will sell that. If they can't, now the second part I buy. If Ohio State runs on Oregon, this game will not be close. I don't think it'll be close. So I'll sell the first part, buy the second. Lucky Duck 512. The next 3 games will not only define this season, but will ultimately define the Marcus Freeman era at Notre Dame, meaning if they don't take the steps as an offense and a team as a whole, then they will always be this up and down next team for the rest of Marcus Freeman's tenure. I'm going to sell that. I don't think that what they do the next 3 games will be determinative to that degree. I don't. I think it'll have an impact, and it'll be concerning, but I don't think it will definitely be that. I mean, we're still year 3. They're still doing some good things. It means that there's still a learning process, and it may mean that that's true, but I don't think it definitely does. I guess I'm where I'm pushing back and selling Lucky Duck is I'm selling degrees. I don't think it definitively is so. I will be concerned if we have, like, let's say Notre Dame drops one of these next 3 games. It'll make me concerned about the future of Marcus Freeman, but it won't mean this is who he is. He's never going to change. This is just how it's going to be. I don't think it means that. It'll make me concerned that it could mean that, but it doesn't definitely mean that that's the case. Lucky Duck 512. The green jersey with gold pants needs to be the next Irish wear green combo. I'm gonna sell that. This is personal preference. I don't like the gold pants with the green jerseys. I just don't. I know a lot of people do. I just, for whatever reason, because like the gold's not the same. If I'm doing wear green, here's what I would do. I would have it for a road game. If I'm going to do the gold and the white, the gold pants with green, I would have it as a road uniform where it's just the numbers are green and like we've seen in the past. If I'm doing a home game, I would go all green or the green and white. I think both of those looked great. I liked both of them. I thought they were both awesome. I would do those. I just don't love. I mean, I know I've seen some like renderings of people editing photos to add green pants, and that's fine. But the gold pants always look better in those photos than they do in real life. So I just don't see that. Bice Hold Army or Navy is the highest ranked team Notre Dame plays at the end of the season. Sell that big time, because I think once Notre Dame beats both teams, and I'll have a Bice Hold on that later, then both of those teams will be ranked below A&M, maybe below USC, maybe below Louisville. No, I don't. And then one of them is going to, obviously lose to the other. So I'm going to sell that. Lucky Duck 512, Bice Hold. Notre Dame flipping Jalen Cooper and Jalen Wiggins changes everyone's feeling on the D-line and wide receiver recruiting for the cycle. If that happens, yes, that should do that. Number one, D-line recruiting has been better. I don't think it's been as bad as people make it out to be, but it does need to be better. I think Jalen Wiggins will certainly change people's view of the D-line. I don't know that Jalen Cooper will change people's minds about receiver recruiting because, honestly, there's too many people that are obsessed with recruiting rankings, and he's not ranked as a top 100 recruit. But I think Jalen Cooper is a dude. And I think Jalen Cooper is definitely someone who should change people's opinions about receiver recruiting. No question about it. I just don't know that he will. But if that were to happen, for me, it would certainly tell me a lot about this coaching staff's ability to close with some big-time prospects. Jalen Wiggins is very good. Jalen Cooper is very good. There's a lot of work to do with both of them. I feel better about where they are with Jalen Cooper than I do Jalen Wiggins. But if Jalen Wiggins makes it on campus on November 9th, I'll feel really good about their chances with him. I just need to see that it's definitely going to get there. Bison Hold, Alabama has real issues and struggles with beating South Carolina this week. Sell the last part. Bama has legit issues. And it didn't just creep up. Like what we saw against Vanderbilt was an extension of what we saw in the second half against Georgia. And there's some things that have to get fixed in that locker room. But I still don't think they struggle with South Carolina because I just don't think South Carolina has the type of skill talent that has given Bama problems so far. And I don't think – and their offense is really struggling right now with their quarterback not being 100%. Lucky Duck says if USC loses to Penn State, Lincoln Riley is not the head coach when they play Notre Dame at the end of the year. I sell that. I don't think they're going to fire him in season. I'll sell that. But, I mean, stranger things have happened out in L.A., but I don't think that'll be the case. Just Your Ordinary Joe buys a hold on at least one play this year, including postseason. Offense will come out in wishbone formation on 4th and 24, with 4 and 24 behind 13. So Jadarian and Jeremiah Love behind right Leonard, and Brian will freak. Freak in a good way. I mean, like as a wrinkle near the goal line, I'd be actually totally fine with that. I would freak out in a good way if they did that in the goal line. Sure. So I'll buy that if you mean it in a good way. If you mean it in a bad way, I won't freak out in a bad way because I think that'd be kind of an interesting goal line situation, to be honest with you. Let's get to a couple more, and we got to get out of here. Let's see. Older than dirt, the closest thing to any form of option at Notre Dame will be what I think is called quarterback speed, with the tailback running as the option back. It'll work great because of the tight ends and wideouts blocking ability, making 2 possible running lanes. I talked about this a little bit last week. I mean, Notre Dame could implement that. They got to be careful if they do. I'm okay if they do. It just takes a lot of time to get the angles and the timing of the pitch down. But I mean, Notre Dame runs options all the time. I mean, an RPO is run, pass, option. That's an option play. It may not be a traditional option play. And if you're referring to traditional option plays that require a pitch, then maybe we won't see any of that. But speed would be the closest thing to it. But Notre Dame's already run option plays. It's an RPO. I mean, literally the quarterback has an option to hand the ball off or keep it and run, hand the ball off and keep it and throw, hand the ball off, keep it and run, then throw. I mean, those are all options. It just doesn't look like the traditional option. So I'm going to sell that because I think they're already doing that. If you're referring to traditional option, then sure, that would be the closest thing to it. Dane Dad 22 buys a hold. The rules committee will look at the targeting rule and eliminate it as a specific penalty for the 2025 season. It will still be a personal foul, but no longer targeting, a suspension for a half of a game. I think it should still be considered targeting. And I think they would still call it targeting. I think what they would do is just like a pass interference is a 15-yard penalty. It's called pass interference. It's not a personal foul, even though it gives you a 15-yard penalty. I'm still okay calling it targeting. What I think they should do is make the second one be the one that you get ejected for, just like a personal foul. So I would treat it like a personal foul, not like what they treat it now. Do I think they'll do that? No, because I think that they are afraid that they'll get sued because somebody gets hurt and they'll lose it because of they changed the rules. So I don't think they have the guts to change it, Dane Dad, but I think they should. I think what you're saying is what they should do. Still call it targeting, but it should be treated like a personal foul. Get 2 of them, and you're done. Next one from Dane Dad. We'll see more playing time for the freshman skill players in the second half of the season. I'm going to hold on that. I want to see what this team looks like coming out of the break. I'm leaning towards selling because I think personnel-wise, what we've seen so far is what we're going to see. But I'd like to see a couple guys get triggered into the lineup. So I'm going to hold on that and see what we see this weekend. Andy Tommy, Riley Leonard buys a hold. Riley Leonard throws 26 passes, completing 18 for 215 yards and 2 touchdowns, 1 to Bo Collins and the other to Jaden Greathouse. Riley will also have 11 rushes for 82 yards, no interceptions and no fumbles against Stanford Cardinal. I'm going to buy that. Sounds good to me. I mean, I'm not a fortune teller, so the only thing I would say is I'd like to see a little bit more than 215 yards passing, but hey, that's a good day's work. I'll take that. Absolutely take that. 13 reasons why. With the changes in the transfer portal NIL, teams will not be able to stack talent for depth, creating more parity in college football, and this is why Nick Saban retired when he did. Buy the first one to a degree. Smart teams will still be able to have depth. Look at Notre Dame. teams that still build through the high school portal or the high school recruiting and recruit the right type of players will still have good depth. But teams that just live in the portal like Louisville, USC, they'll struggle with depth all the time. So with some teams, that is true. And this is why Nick Saban retired when he did. To a degree, I think NIL and portal is why Nick Saban retired. I don't think it's because of parity. I think you're seeing it. Look at the attitudes from Bama players. Like he said it when he left. Like, I got guys coming to my office want me to guarantee playing time or they're going to leave. They want to know how much they're going to be getting paid and not, hey, coach, what I can do to get better. You're seeing former Bama players calling out current Bama players. Now, I don't think that's necessarily fair because they had their issues back then too, but there's just, it's a different type of athlete we're raising. And I don't think that's a good thing. Just because, like, we can say, hey, they needed to be brought into this from NIL is a good thing, in my opinion. It is. But the manner in which we're giving players the power they are, the fact that we're not holding them accountable for their actions, there's just a lot of things where just because one thing needed to change doesn't mean we needed to bring all this other nonsense with it. And that's the mistake I think we're making as leadership in this sport and with young people. Indy Bet got a lot of them, so we'll roll through these as quickly as possible. If there are no further injuries, as younger players get more experience and we get a few players back from injury, the team will continue to improve and will be significantly stronger on both sides of the ball. I buy that. I think it's not just because of that. There's other reasons why. New systems, transfer guys getting more comfortable. But, yeah, I think that's true. Buy that. The adjustments made in the bye week lead to our best performance of the year against Stanford. Yeah, I'll buy that. I think this team's going to come out and play really well in this game. We'll talk more about that tomorrow, but I'll buy that. ND Bet says Freeman has made his point disciplining Price and will fully reintegrate him into the game plan. Sell that because Freeman didn't make that decision. That is a Dylan McCullough decision. Dylan McCullough made that point, and they will fully reintegrate him into the game plan. That's the rule. They did it with Audric Estime 2 years ago, and he came out the next game and had 100 yards. I mean, he did it with Audric the year before, and then he got benched. I think it was against Stanford, or so. And he comes out, UNLV maybe, got benched, and then comes out the next week, and the first 2 carries of the game are to Audric. So, yeah, they'll reintegrate him into the game plan, but that was not Freeman's decision. And by so hold, there will be a 100-yard receiver against Stanford. I will buy that. And this is going to be the last one, and then I got to get going. DM Indy 13, there will be less than 10 Power 4 teams with 2 or fewer losses at the end of the regular season or after conference championship weekend. Man, less than 10. Oh, boy. Man. Oh, boy. Less than 10 teams with 2 or fewer losses. I'm going to sell that because I think there's going to be more than 10 with 2 or fewer. If you were to say 1 or no losses, I'd have bought that definitely. But 2 or fewer, no, I don't think there's going to be like almost everybody in the SEC is going to have 3. Almost everybody in the Big Ten is going to have 3. I don't see that, but it won't be way over. But I'm going to sell that one. I'm going to sell that one because I don't think it'll be quite that. So that's going to do it for the show. Brandon, I'm not going to say what conference the quarterback I think they're going to flip is from. I'm not going to give that away, but like I said, I do think they will flip a quarterback. I'm very confident that they're going to flip a kid that's from another school. Just not necessarily sure which one because it's not a given that they're going to get the one that they want. There's some couple guys I have in mind, and they would all be flips at this point in time. So I think they'll flip somebody, but we'll kind of see who that is. Have to wait and see, man. I see what you did there. I appreciate that attempt to try to get that out of me. It's well done, my friend. Well done. So, folks, that's going to do it. Hey, head on over. They got a mailbag going on over at IB Nation Sports Talk. So you guys can head on over there now, jump in with Sean Stiers, get those questions in, help them get rocking and rolling with their mailbag. It's going to be Trevor's over there with Sean tonight. So go give them some really good questions. And I'm going to try to go into the show and try to answer some of the BISA holds that I didn't get to. I'm going to try to get to that here on the message board. So check that out as well. You can find us again, folks, at boards.irishbreakdown.com. That's our premium message board. Hit that like, hit that subscribe, hit the notification bell, share this podcast, give us a 5-star review. And of course, as always, boards.irishbreakdown.com. The best way to support us, you guys want to know, hey, how can we support you guys? Become a member at Irish Breakdown's premium board at boards.irishbreakdown.com. If you want to find our free content, you can find that at irishbreakdown.com. But the premium stuff is at boards.irishbreakdown.com. Have a great rest of your day, everybody. I'll see y'all over at IB Nation Sports Talk for the Mailbag, Wednesday Mailbag. here very, very shortly.